conversations, we call the meeting to order.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to start the meeting.
Thank you, Scott.
I have my own pieces.
Appreciate you, Scott. Okay, we'll go ahead and first. Good order. Just a reminder that the board of directors may vote to hold an executive session for the purpose of obtaining legal advice from Mountain Line's attorney on any matter listed on the agenda pursuant to ARS 38-431-3A3. The executive session may be held at any time during the meeting. Executive sessions are not open to the public pursuant to Arizona open meeting law. With that, go ahead and roll call.
Thank you. Covino, Vasquez, and Judy Begay are both excused. City of Flagstaff, Lori Matthews. Here. City of Flagstaff, Miranda Sweet. Here. And City of Flagstaff, David Spence.
Here.
Thank you. NAU, Josh Mayer.
Here.
And Jeff McKay.
Here.
Thank you. And CCC, Tony Williams.
Here.
And we are expecting Kurt Stahl, I believe. And then, Coconino County is Littleton.
Yes.
City of Flagstaff, Joanne Keene. Here. Thank you. City of Flagstaff, Citizen Representative Michelle James. Here. Thank you. Coconino County, Citizen Representative Harold Ellington. Here. Thank you. NAU Aaron Stom. Here. Thanks. And Rivera.
Hello.
Thank you. CCC, as I mentioned, Kurt is expected. He did say he would have to leave at lunch, so. Economic Development Representative Gail Jackson. Here. Thank you. Metro Plan, both Dave Wessel and Kate Morgan are excused. And our newly elected NAU student representative, the ASNAU student, I believe is on summer break, so she is excused. And we have some guests with us. We have our attorneys, Scott Holcomb and Cameron Stanley, right over here. And on Zoom, we have some presenters. With Transpro, we have Aaron Bingaman, Brendan Morgan, Bill Barnett, and Micah McNatt. And then we are expecting, in addition, Bob Holmes from Nexus Consulting. I don't know that he's on yet. And Karen Cruz from the Cruz Group. And then we have staff here in the room as well. Thank you.
Thank you. On to our safety minute, Sam Short.
Thank you. My name is Sam Short. I'm the workforce director from Outline. Today, our safety minute is regarding employee mental health. Mental distress has long been a hidden issue in the workplace. Employees are often unaware of the resources available to them, while employers may be unaware of the effects mental distress has on our safety and their bottom line. Mountain Line recognizes that addressing mental distress in the workplace takes the whole organization, including leadership, human resources, supervisors, managers, and safety professionals, and of course, employees themselves. Key actions we take include understanding how workplace conditions and culture can impact employee mental health, and in some cases, create or enhance employee mental distress. Ensuring leaders, managers, and supervisors prioritize employee mental health and well-being will work to prevent mental distress and support employees experiencing mental distress. Ensuring human resources develop robust, compassionate, and clear policies, programs, and procedures to prevent mental distress and support employees experiencing mental distress. And also providing employee education, increasing awareness on mental well-being and distress, as well as awareness of workplace resources, support, and policies. For more information on Employee Mental Health Month, please see your manager or human resources. Thank you and welcome to today's joint board meeting.
Yeah. Milestone anniversary. Heather.
Great. So I have one milestone anniversary to share with you today. Jimmy Gray joined us 20 years ago as a part-time transit operator, and that's because he was full-time employed at Northern Arizona University. Jimmy retired from NAU, but not Mountain Line, and he continues to work within our workforce. And these are the comments from his leadership team. Jimmy is a pleasure to work with. He is friendly and an approachable colleague who consistently greets others with a smile and shows genuine concern for their well-being. He's willing to assist with training new operators and readily steps up to help cover shifts when needed. His professionalism and stellar safety record make him popular amongst our riders. The day that Jimmy decides to completely retire will be a sad one. Mountain Line will be a smaller place without his jovial presence. Our team actually celebrated Jimmy last week. The team pitched in and threw a magnificent celebration for Jimmy's 20 years at our Downtown Connection Center last week. And I said to Jimmy, when are you going to retire? And he said, the day after you do. So we have Jimmy for at least 15 years. I'm so grateful. Sorry, Jimmy couldn't make it today. He's actually, I think, in vehicle this morning driving service, but I'm very glad to celebrate his 20 years of service with Mountain Line.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we have several discussion items this morning and through the afternoon. Starting off with item number 5, compensation study. Sam Short.
Good morning, Sam Short, Workforce Director for Mountain Line again. During the past 18 to 24 months, Mountain Line has engaged TransPro Consulting with assisting us in several projects, including the most recent compensation study and organizational structure review. So it's my pleasure to introduce Aaron Bingaman and Brendan Morgan from TransPro Consulting.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you. How's my volume? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. Great to be with you. Thank you, Sam, for that introduction. Also want to recognize Jill Barnett from our team, along with Micah McNatt, who has been serving as a subject matter expert for us, particularly on the compensation study. So when and if you have questions I can't answer, Micah is my phone a friend. And Brendan and Jill, I'm sure, will remind me of things I forgot to say if there was something I forgot to say. So great to be with you this morning. Please take us forward. So really simply, just a few slides here to give you an overview. What were our objectives with the study, little highlight of our processes, and then down to recommendations we have provided the executive team at Mountain Line with an understanding of financial impact for any of our findings. Next slide, please. So pretty straightforward. Our objective here was to understand where and how Mountain Line salaries compare to similar marketplaces for public employers, and identify if there was anything out of alignment in terms of those salaries, and identify any potential adjustments as Mountain Line continues to really pursue the objective of being an employer of choice and offering its team members competitive salaries and really positioning the organization for successful hiring as well long forward. This is I'm sure for many of you, a standard of practice, best practice to do this every couple of years. And so we're excited to be Mountain Line's partner on this initiative this time around. So let's go forward. The process, again, we engaged Mercer, Mr. McNatt represents them really to help us truly understand and conduct that analysis, looking at salaries and roles. And in particular, how does Mountain Line really compare against the Flagstaff market in identifying any of that and any of the adjustments, and then also helping us with the assessment of the financial impacts connected with that. That team works in many different industries around the country, so we're really grateful to have their subject expertise as our partners in this. Next slide. So the good news, in conducting this assessment, we really only defined 9 total positions that were in need of adjustment under compensation, which I think is a wonderful recognition for how Mountain Line has continued to approach its staffing and compensation models. Those 9 positions have relatively modest impact with just over $71,000 in needed salary adjustments, another $30,000 and change in benefits adjustments, with a fully burdened potential impact in that first year of $103,198. Do want to acknowledge that we did identify some potential opportunity for compensation adjustment to the CEO general manager. At this time, these recommendations don't focus on that, really focusing on those 9 positions to ensure that we've got alignment for those folks going forward. And that's the show. Happy to answer any questions that you all may have, and look forward to any discussion that you all may want to have going forward.
Any questions for Transpearl? All right. Sure.
I want to take a moment to really encourage you to celebrate with us that out of 107 positions, 9 are not being paid at market rates. So that really is something to celebrate. Most of the time we enter a compensation study, we enter it with an assumption that we actually are behind the market in our wage. And in this situation, we're not. And so that means the majority of our staff, 78% of our staff, are being paid market and competitive wages for Flagstaff specifically. So that's the approach we're taking with our staff, is to really talk about that bullet point and that celebration, so that people don't feel like, well, I didn't get a pay raise out of this. Well, no, you didn't, because we were already paying you market wages. So it's really something to be celebrated. And we didn't list the positions out here, but I want to acknowledge a lot of the positions in the 9 are really in our senior leadership and executive leadership positions, because those are the positions that haven't gotten pay raises that we have offered to frontline staff, with our focus for retaining and attracting the frontline people that we need to conduct the business. Some of the other things are, as we've promoted from within, which I'm a big proponent of. I am sitting here because I have been invested in by Mountain Line and been promoted within the agency several times over. One thing we know is when we promote from within, you actually end up with a cheaper deal. When you have to go out and compete in the market for a candidate, you're going to wind up with higher wage offerings. And so that's one of the other things that we've identified here that we're trying to address, because we know that if any member of our wonderful staff chooses to go somewhere else, it's going to be more costly to bring someone in from the open market for these positions. And so I want the people in the jobs to be competitively paid as well. So I just wanted to add those 2 caveats. Sorry, Aaron, for jumping in on your show. This is something we spend a lot of time talking to Transpearl about as well. And I feel like it's very valuable for you to also know that. So we're celebrating the staff that are being competitively paid, and we're correcting the wages for those staff who are underneath that market.
Good. Thanks, Aaron. No further questions. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the organizational structure review. Heather?
Thank you. I'm just going to briefly give an introduction. We talked several months ago, I think as both the Transit Advisory Committee and the Board of Directors, about the need for succession planning, or the need to identify how do we develop our team members, how do we ensure that we're staffed appropriately for whatever might come in the future. And then in November, we got more money, and now we have to introduce new services, which has begged the question, are we staffed for that implementation of services? That was accounted for in the funding request that we made, is that we would need to right size our agency and have the right positions in place. And so that really triggered this org structure review, which was designed to look at not just how we're staffed today and what we might want from a year from now, but really what should our org structure look like long-term, 5 years from now, 100% of Prop 488 is implemented, what staff is needed to get us there. So I just wanted to set the stage a little bit, but again, turn it over to TransPro, who has been our consultant on this org structure review, and really on that long-term succession and development planning effort that we have underway as well.
Hi, it's me again. Thank you, Heather, for that introduction. This has been an interesting exercise to be collaborating with the team on. And to Heather's point, I'll expound. This actually started with can you help us think about succession planning? And, in the course of the conversation, the recognition of how we're growing and how the community has invested in us, what an exciting opportunity and the right time to ask the question. Sure, we should definitely be thinking about our future and succession, but are we organized to deliver success? Are we organized in a way that will allow us to keep our promise to our community, our customers, our investors, in how we structure ourselves going forward? Take us forward here. Similarly, how we'll just walk through what were our objectives, how we've been tackling the process, and some initial work around what we're calling the functional org chart. I'll explain that in a moment. Let's go forward, please. So really, again, as Heather stated regarding those objectives, right? We've got this potential doubling in size, and so making sure that we're adequately resourced and adequately organized, like I said, to deliver success, and ensuring we're just meeting that great standard that Mountain Line sets for the Flagstaff community and the county and how we serve. And so those were our primary objectives. With that, then comes the development opportunities necessary to be able to ensure staff have the skills and the competencies and abilities to deliver what our needs. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about our approach. The initial assessment was really to take a look at both skills and competencies, and we define those things as this. What are the soft skills being the competencies, right? Things like our values, leadership, collaboration, communication, that are going to be necessary for each of our teams to be able to deliver their mission, their function, their role with excellence. What are the technical skills that we need? That FTA expertise, the transit operations, the strategic planning, the long-range planning. So really looking at that in our analysis. And so we mapped those things both as a skills and competency matrix. Looking at those things, understanding some of the unique individuals within the team, conducting one-on-one staff interviews, really helped us start to understand where are there some potential gaps, where are there some potential needs that we're going to use this word role, and that's a really important word for us today when you look at the functional chart, but where are the needs for roles that will support and sustain our success? The final product, in addition to recommendations for org structure, will also include change and implementation management. So how do we actually deploy this over a series of time, right? So it's not as if any recommendations that we make and that the team adopts go into action tomorrow. We have priorities within this, and those priorities are both informed by programmatic service needs, as much as they are informed by staffing support and competency needs. So really trying to be thoughtful in how we deploy that, followed by then professional development and succession planning recommendations for the implementation. So we want to share with you today, we'll call this work in progress. What is our functional org chart alignment? So please go forward. This is our org chart today. I think things that we see is as your partners, as your advisors here, many roles kind of assigned or developed based on the needs of the moment of the organization at the time. And that's not a criticism. That is not uncommon for organizations such as Mountain Line that has been organically organically growing and developing and evolving over a series of time. I think many of us recognize that there is a length of tenure, particularly amongst many of our leaders and directors inside the organization. And so, fitting responsibilities in alignment with skill, competency, and need, which is definitely what happens. One of those things that has unfolded from this, as you can see, a lot of direct lines to our CEO and general manager. And so that's a lot of personalities and people to manage. And we recognize and identify the need and opportunity to grow delegation and responsibility. But that also is going to require some investment in skill development and in leadership development to start to fill those roles. So as we start to think about an ideal state going forward, we'll show you the draft of our recommended org chart, and we'll highlight some of the differences between today and what we believe starts to make sense for tomorrow. So if you click me forward one more. So a couple things I really want to highlight, and I mentioned that word roles and the importance of roles in this conversation. You might look at that line below the orange boxes. We'll talk about the orange boxes in a moment, but I want you to see that line of roles that starts to say safety, security, people, finance, marketing and communications, planning and development, transportation, fleet, facilities, and IT. There's a recognition here that a role and a job or position are two different things, and that it is a potential for us to have a position that wears a couple different hats. That's not uncommon. So we're not advancing and advocating for the development of 9 directors reporting to 2 chief deputies there. What we want to make clear is that these are the core functional roles that we need to address. And as we do the next step of work and starting to really start to think about the people and the job descriptions that accompany that, you would see in the future some consolidation of some of those roles by position. So just wanted to make sure that was clear in terms of what you're looking at. So what we see here is obviously our general manager and CEO, supported by 2 those would be positions, 2 new positions of a deputy GM, 1 for administration and then 1 for operations. Part of what we see as an opportunity is start to develop a potentially next level leader for Mountain Line, as well as some alignment and organization to the portfolio so that we can build more cross collaboration, communication, clarity of processes and ownership in the work that Mountain Line is doing, and then organizing those roles underneath those portfolios to deliver all of these different components of running a transit system for us in Flagstaff. I'm going to pause there and invite Heather's voice. She's been a very collaborative partner in developing this. Our team developed 3 different scenarios as initial thinking and recommendations based off of our analysis, and have tweaked and refined a couple of those to get to this one. And so, Heather, any additional thoughts or comments you want to make for the board's consideration and feedback here?
Yeah, first I'd like to acknowledge it is extremely small on the screen that we have.
Sorry.
So I apologize to everyone who's struggling to read this screen. We will send this out so that you have it. This is just the first of this discussion as well. So I want to be really clear. You're going to have lots of opportunity for additional input. But really, I appreciate the approach that Transport really brought to this, because I can be a little bit of what's worked in the past worked, so why don't we just do it again? And I was encouraged to think about what characteristics that we all on our existing team have, what are functions that the organization needs going forward, what are some of the challenges that we've had with gaps in our organizational structure over the past year to 2 years, and how do we address some of that by thinking about functions, not positions. And that this has been terrible hard for many of us, because I think in people. So I look at all that and I start counting heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is not about the people. It's about ensuring that as we look at the work that we have to deliver, that we have people that represent each of those functions. And it might be one person that represents several of those functions. It might be one person, depending on the function, the magnitude of the function, the severity of an error in that function, whatever it might be. So I really appreciate the way that Transpo has challenged us to think about an org structure, because it gets really easy just to go back to what we know, where it's comfortable. And one of the earliest editions of this actually looked exactly like our org structure looked 3 years ago. And so the concern was there's still those gaps. And so I apologize that it's small, but really what we're trying to do is isolate the functions. So I'm just going to share one example that you can't read on the screen, but under that Deputy GM of Operations, we're trying to separate fleet and facilities to ensure that we are addressing those functions and their importance going forward. And right now we have that as a shared position. One position supervises all of our facilities maintenance and all of our fleet maintenance. And as we grow forward, as we move into a new facility, as we finish constructing a new facility, as we consider and take on more electric vehicles in the future, are we addressing those functions appropriately by sharing one position over? So we've just tried to really look at functions and attention to each of these. And I know that's just one example, but I hope that helps build some of why we're doing the work that we're doing. I'm sure there's 1,000 questions since you can't read what's on the screen. And we will, one, make sure that doesn't happen in the new building, and two, make sure that when things are small, we bring those as handouts for you. But with that, I think we're open to, if you have comments for me based on what I've said.
And I just,
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add just one other thing to what Heather said. Like you can see again, a second example that I just love to highlight there. You can see in the middle, or maybe you can't see, but in the middle there, a real emphasis on planning and development and the recognition for how we need to continue that long range vision and planning, the anticipation related to service planning and capital planning, as well as the functionality around performance management. You know, we have a responsibility to demonstrate the value that Mountain Line's delivering to the community. And I think one of the gaps that we've identified is kind of that consistency and approach to project management throughout the enterprise. So how do we emphasize that as a functional area? And I think the team's done a pretty fine job of disconnecting themselves from the actual people in the place. I think Heather's being harder on herself than she should be. But thinking about those, functions was definitely our first step here to make sure we've got everything covered.
so my question was, when this comes to the board for further examination and approval, I'm assuming that this all can be attainable now that there was an increase to the transportation tax. So when it comes to the board, will we be getting like the projected revenues from the transportation tax? Because I know our biggest promise was increasing our service. And so seeing that instead of individual silos of management versus, drivers and stuff, will we be presented with the big picture to say, this is the revenue that we're projecting, and then fill it from there?
Yeah, so when we do come to a place of, this is the org structure we are asking you to adopt, so that we know we build it into our financial plan over the next 3 to 5 years. So that's really important to me, is that you're saying, yes, we're on the same page, get there in 5 years. We can then start putting that in our financial plan to do exactly what you're saying. And it's first priority for our financials is to deliver service that we told the public we were going to deliver. It does mean that we need to be staffed appropriately, but I would just offer that staffing was a consideration of the funding that we asked. So some of this was definitely identified within that financial scenario. But yes, when we come back and say, please adopt this org structure, and I want to acknowledge we don't normally ask you to adopt an org structure, but because it has such a financial implication, I want to bring it back for adoption, and it will include that financial discussion. Here's the revenues, here's how they are changed with this org structure, here's how they're changed if we don't do that org structure, but here will be limitations on how we deliver service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
As you were going through this exercise, or obviously still going through the exercise, sometimes when there's reorgs on org charts, you also see a lack or a need of, but then there's also the other opposite, right? Where there's maybe an overuse or that's top heavy or whatever that might be. Are you seeing anything like that? Or as you're going through this, has there been something you've come across already where you said, yeah, this particular position is not necessary because we have XYZ already in place.
I think that as we look at this, what we've identified is that there are some opportunities to streamline or change how we look at a position. And some of that's based on technology, right? You bring in technology to do something that you've had someone doing in Excel spreadsheets, just as one example. We have not seen a true elimination of anyone when we talk about the people, right? So this is not demonstrating that we're eliminating people, but it's demonstrating that we are going to use people in positions differently to support the long-term goal of delivering additional services. I think what we found more than anything else was Mountain Lion runs lean and mean, and we have run lean and mean a very long time. I remember in the recession telling people, I can't go to lunch with you, we're too busy. That's going to change in the next 3 to 5 years. I still don't take lunches, right? We run lean and mean. Every moment of our day is being spent on this. And I'm speaking about myself, but I can point to anyone around the room that would tell you they regularly feel like they're being asked to do 50 hours of work in their 40-hour work week. And the opportunity that exists out of that is we're missing things. We're not engaged like we want to be on regional plan conversations because we don't have the right person. We don't have the time to focus on that. So that's more what we've identified is that it's great to be lean and mean, but when you run so lean that you're not engaging in those places and representing your programs the way you're supposed to be, you're missing opportunities.
If I may also answer the question in addition to what Heather said, I think that what we have seen are, opportunities for growth that would contribute to efficiency, right? So as I mentioned around project management, program management, performance management, these are functions that are happening today. How we think about them across the entire organization as we really get into that development programming and succession planning is going to be, I think, a key to helping this team, continue to do more with what it has. I won't say do more with less, but do more with what it has with consistency and modeling the behaviors that we really desire. I mean, I think one of the things that we say pretty consistently, right, in org chart is a tool, right? It communicates something to people within the enterprise and beyond. This is how we're organized as a team, and this is how we, go about and report and think about functionality to deliver the mission. The other half of the organization, though, ends up being culture. So this is just a tool. So we got to make sure that we leverage this tool to ensure that the recommendations for succession planning and development also influence the behaviors of excellence that are going to continue to allow Mountain Lion to enjoy success.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, thanks again, Aaron. And we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Item 7 is the 25-26 legislative priorities discussion. I will introduce.
I will. We again have a couple guest speakers for you. So I hope you're aware that Mountain Lion does contract with 2 legislative liaisons. We have one that works on the federal picture and we have one that works on the state picture. Mountain Lion has been engaged in legislative conversations and priority setting for the last several years. We think it's really critical that if we don't use our own voices, no one's going to speak on our behalf. And so we're very grateful to have the 2 individuals that are joining us today, Bob Holmes and Tracy Sutton with Nexus Consulting. They do our federal picture discussions, conversations. They taught me how to speak in DC. And then Karen Cruz, also on the line, represents us at the state capitol and again helps us navigate the nuance of language, which is sometimes the most important thing to know when you're talking to elected officials, is when to tell people you have pink roses versus when to say you have red roses, because they like red better than pink. So those are just some of the things that we do. The goal today was just to give you an overview of the transit picture in both of these windows, both the federal discussions and the state conversations. And then that will kind of lead to what's coming next month, which is asking you to update our legislative priorities, which we haven't updated in 18 months for various reasons. It feels timely. I thought before we could ask you to adopt them, we needed to give you an idea of what we're seeing and where we're going. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bob and Tracy with Nexus Consulting to really talk about that federal oversight. And right, if you go to the next page, I think it's just, this is our adopted legislative priorities. We don't have slides for Nexus or Karen or for Cruise Group, but I thought this was a good backdrop to that conversation. All you, Bob.
Thanks, Heather, and I wish I was there with you all in beautiful Flagstaff. It's rainy and disgusting here, so we wish we were there. Again, my name is Bob Holmes, Nexus Consulting. As you guys know, many of you know me. We represent Mountain Line, we represent the city of Flagstaff, and we represent Coconino County, and we're honored to be here, and we're so proud of our partnership with them, and we really just appreciate all of you and your dedication to these issues. Before we begin, I want to introduce many of you to Tracy Sutton. Tracy joined Nexus Consulting about, I guess we're on week 2, Tracy. And many of you know her. She worked 28 years on the Hill. Can't believe we're that old, Tracy. And the last 6 years, she worked for Congressman Stanton as his legislative director and his chief of staff. And Tracy has an incredible, knowledge and history of the Hill. And she has just an unbelievable background when it comes down to transportation and infrastructure, which Congressman Stanton has served on and continues to serve on. So she is a wealth of knowledge, and we are so honored and privileged to have her on our team, and she'll be a great asset to all of you. Before I jump in to transit, and transportation priorities, I really want to give a backdrop, excuse me, of what's going on in DC to kind of give you some context and perspective. You know, the makeup of Congress for the next 2 years is going to be all Republicans. They control the House, the Senate, and the executive branch. And just for your own context, in 2020, Democrats controlled all 3 levers of power. So they controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency. In 2022, Republicans controlled the House, and Democrats control the Senate and the presidency. And my point's really simple: is Washington is a really transient place, and we have to be flexible and adaptable. And so my point here is just lean into what transit and transportation does very well. Rural transit's doing really, really well. We're doing much better than some of the big transit agency in terms of where we were pre-COVID and post-COVID. And so just lean into those things, and I think we'll be successful. Excuse me. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Republican majority's kind of priorities. You've heard about it all in the news. They are going at a frenetic pace. In my 25 years of doing this, I've never seen such high activity, good, bad, fair, or indifferent. But the central themes of the Republican majority are DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk, who's going to step down here shortly. And their main goal is to cut wasteful spending. They want to reduce the debt, eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. And something where I think we can really lean in transit and transportation is regulatory reform. This administration really wants to make it easier for government instrumentalities to have more flexibility and control over what they do. So that's another priority: modifying or eliminating some of the Green New Deal's programs, what they call the Green New Deal, which was in President Biden's IRA. They want to beef up the military and border security, and they want to continue expiring tax cuts and some potentially new tax cuts that expire under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So that's kind of the first kind of highlight of what's going on. The second thing is, with an all Republican majority, whenever you have one party in complete control, they get to use an instrument, a budget instrument, excuse me, called reconciliation. And you've heard a lot about it on the news, and they're using it right now. Republicans are using that mechanism. The House likely this week will, or at least try to pass their budget reconciliation bill. And Republicans are using it to reform, cut Medicaid, increase the debt ceiling limit. And the debt ceiling will expire. They're saying sometime in August or September. Again, they're going to use DOGE to cut spending in some of these bills. They'll increase funding for border security and the military. And of course, as I talked about earlier, pass new and expiring tax cuts. Now, Congress must pass this bill before September 30th, because that is the end of the fiscal year, or they lose their opportunity to use budget reconciliation and will have to punt it until next year. So the long story short is this is really taking up all the oxygen in the room in terms of what is going on in Congress right now. So I want to just kind of forwarding that. I think we want to talk a little bit about President Trump's fiscal year 26 budget. It has gotten a lot of noise around here. And I want to caution you that you shouldn't glean much from this because at the end of the day, the president's proposal is just a political instrument and decisions will be made by Congress. Congress, under Article 1, Section 8, has the right to appropriate all the money. So, but the top lines of the president's budget, and we'll start getting into the transportation section now, is is over $163 billion in programs across the board. You've heard about many of them, USAID and some other programs. So overall, that equates to a non-defense spending would be cut by 22.6%. So it's pretty massive. However, having said that, transportation is one of the rare places that actually saw an increase. For transportation, the president's budget would include 1.2 billion more for transportation programs such as build, infra, some of the rail grants. And that's about a 5.8%, almost a 6% increase. However, there are some proposed eliminations within transportation, including the NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. They're planning to eliminate that, which is about $4.1 billion in savings, and cut about $300 million from the Essential Air Service Program that serves rural America. When we talk about transportation, especially with the new administration, I think it's really important to point out that this administration strongly favors what I like to refer to as traditional infrastructure, roads, bridges, airports, while being somewhat oblivious to rail and transit. I know particularly they don't like rail because they are concerned that you can't move a rail line. And they say that, people often move different places, so they don't like the stagnancy of rail. Again, I just want to point out that the skinny budget is just a proposal and it serves as a policy blueprint. Ultimately, Congress is going to, again, make these decisions with regards to appropriations. And then I want to quickly get into appropriations. As you guys know, last year, the CR translated into no earmarks for FY25. So most members and our senators are prioritizing the fiscal year 25 request for fiscal year 26. We have talked to the Senate offices. They've received about 434 earmark requests this year. And, they get about 60 requests. Extrapolating out, there's probably about 10 to 15 slots for earmarks. So it's a very, very competitive year. So members will be posting those. We've already hit the deadlines. So members should be posting their earmark requests in the House either today, later this afternoon, or tomorrow. And it could be as late as next week. The Senate will start posting theirs on June 2nd and will go till about June 15th. As is typical, the end of the fiscal year is usually, well, is September 30th. We expect Congress to pass a continuing resolution through September 30th, probably towards the end of the year, and we expect the budget bills, the omnibus appropriations bill, probably towards the end of the year. And so that kind of is a backdrop for some of the regional transportation priorities. And I want to commend all of you for the good work that you have put into this. One of the we did very well under IIJA, and we got massive increases, and it was in a really interesting time when we were trying to save the economy from the effects of COVID. So those massive increases are something of the past, and I think the TAC, you guys did a really good job making reasonable requests, because if you make requests that aren't reasonable, they're just going to be going thrown into the dustbin. But they also reflect, I believe, the values of the community. So, I think it was very smart and wise for for you all to ask for maintenance of current levels. We did really well under IIJA. Those were massive increases, in some cases 40% year over year. So we should take those wins and be happy. And under this administration, we likely won't see big increases. So anything we can do to preserve what we got under IIJA, I view, and I think you all should view as a victory. And I think it is attainable, and that's kind of the goal here. Similarly, some of the other priorities that are highlighted by the TAC, maintaining flexibility in federal programs, ensuring equitable distribution of funding, preserving discretionary grant funding, and increasing the small transit intensive cities STIC program set aside from 3 to 4%, directing focus on rural safety, promoting MPOs and non-MPOs, creating a CDL category for transit and allowing carryover funds, all fall into areas where I believe we can affect the administration, and they'll be very sympathetic to our concerns. So, that this administration is they won the election based on their focus on rural areas, so they're going to really lean in on that. And as I said earlier, they really want to add additional flexibility in the use of funds. So these are really good areas where I think you all have leaned in very firmly, and I think that's where we can be successful. So I again compliment the good work that the team did in putting these together, because I think they're all good, achievable goals. One thing I do want to caution everyone about is a change in semantics. When we're applying for, and when you are applying for grants, in the old administration, the previous administration, you used names like climate change and resiliency and sustainability, EVs, Green New Deal. Those words were sacrosanct. Those words are now poison. So I think it's important that when we focus and talk with administration folks and we're applying for grants, we focus on words that really are important to them. They love the word flexibility. They want everything, especially to this president, is viewed on an economic basis. So he wants to see everything that his administration supports. He wants to see return on investment and economic development. So those are new buzzwords that I would encourage you to use. So I want to open up the floor here and kind of see if anyone has any questions. And I want to just finally conclude with that, every administration, whether we agree or disagree with them, presents opportunities and pitfalls. And where I would suggest that you all lean in is on priorities that align with this administration. if we lean in on flexibility, economic development and opportunity, and return on investment, I think we can be successful. So with that, I'll happily turn it over back to you, Heather. Unless there is anything, Tracy, I'm putting Tracy on the spot, if there's anything she wants to add. But we are happy to answer any questions you have. I am going to drop both Tracy and I's email addresses in the chat. And well, I guess I can't drop it in the chat. But if you need our email addresses, they are bholmes@nexusconsulting.com. That's 2 X's. bholmes@nexusconsulting.com or tsutton@nexusconsulting.com. We are here for you as a resource. We want to be helpful to you, and please let us know if we can do anything to help you. Again, thanks for having us here. We look forward to this conversation, and please don't hesitate to contact us. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Bob. If you don't mind, we'll see if we have questions for you before you hop off.
Bob, appreciate you being here. Appreciate your perspective, your work on the Hill. Josh Mayer, Northern Arizona University. I have a question regarding reconciliation. As you see it now, understanding that there's various factions of the majority party, what are you, in reading the tea leaves, what is the likelihood for the reconciliation package getting through? What are your thoughts on that?
The regulation package, is that what I heard?
Reconciliation.
Oh, the reconciliation, yeah. Well, so I would say this. The House bill and the Senate bill are going to look completely different. The Senate is really squeezing, the president is really squeezing folks on both sides of the Hill to get this done. My bet is that reconciliation gets done. I think the House and Senate bill will be conferenced and they'll be much different. Again, they're gonna put a debt ceiling increase in the bill. So I think the debt ceiling will reach our debt limit sometime in August to September timeframe. So I mean, I really expect it to get done. It's going to be a tough sell for a lot of moderate and conservative Republicans, frankly, but I think the president is very strong and twisting arms, and I think he'll be able to squeeze it through. Tracy, what are your thoughts?
I agree with that. I mean, you've seen the president go up to the Hill yesterday. He has called down a group of members to meet with him this afternoon. Speaker Johnson is still trying to push for a vote today. I think that is going to be interesting, but I think they are trying to keep the pressure on because the longer it drags out for them, the worse it gets and the harder it is. So they want to kind of keep the momentum going. So it will be interesting to watch the House today and see how late they go. And, does Johnson go forward with a vote? Even if he doesn't have the votes, and I think he does. And I think the president will get more and more engaged and ratchet up the pressure.
Yeah, and here's one little inside baseball note. Congressman Connolly from Virginia, a Democrat, died this morning. So that allows Republicans to have another vote. In other words, another no vote. So that's just another interesting sidebar to all of this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Joanne?
Good morning, Bob and Tracy. It's Joanne Keene from the city of Flagstaff. How are both of you? Bob, you and I were communicating yesterday, and I think it's important information for this group. We have several grants that are being reviewed right now by Department of Transportation. And I think the information you provided on the number of grants being reviewed and what that process looks like, I think will be really helpful. Do you mind restating that?
Yeah, how much do I owe you for asking that question? Because it's such a good question, Jen. No, that's a great question. So, and I'm glad you raised that. I think a lot of people are really concerned about grants getting out. And I want to be clear that some grants, especially in the EPA realm, are likely in danger of being lost. Having said that, in the transportation realm, I think we're in pretty good shape. However, 3,500 grants. I had a discussion with the Deputy Assistant Secretary over there, and they said in the last 30 days of the Biden administration, they awarded 3,500 transportation grants through a variety of different programs. They are reviewing every single one of those. And so that's going to take some time. As of 2 weeks ago, they have gone through over 1,000. And according to the Deputy Assistant Secretary, they have not rejected one. So I think it's not a matter of if you'll get your grant, but when. And if you have any grants that are that you're worried about or that you need us to track, we are certainly ready to do that. We have been working closely with the department to flag some that we think are important to get out. We have also pushed, especially in northern Arizona, we have a much smaller construction window than they do in the valley. So we've been trying to use that as a push button for them to say, listen, we need these grants out so we can get them. So I don't think there's any trepidation right now. There shouldn't be any trepidation about getting some of these transportation grants out. It's just going to take a little while longer. Thanks for the question, Joanne. I owe you a drink.
Any other questions? All right. Thanks so much, Bob and Tracy. Appreciate your work.
Jackie does.
Oh, yeah.
Just let everybody know that I emailed out the presentation as a PDF, so you should have it in your email if you have a device that you can look at it on. If you do not have a device that you can look at it on and would like to come up to a closer seat, I'm happy to move back. I know what they say, so I didn't send it to staff because I figured you guys can get it on your own. But you should have that on your as an email from me.
Okay, thanks so much. Did you want to introduce?
All right. Well, thanks, Bob and Tracy. I really appreciate you chiming in today. I know what you've shared is critical to our next. Bob, I have not shared with the board or TAC our reauthorization priorities. So I will be sharing that today and I'll get you feedback on those. I know we still need to submit this week to Stanton's office. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to change gears just a little bit and talk a little about what's going on in the state of Arizona when we talk about transit. But we'll have Karen give us a little bit of an update on where we are at with our priority setting for state. I do have, thanks Rhonda for switching slides. This is the state priorities. I did zoom in a little bit, so hopefully it's a little bit easier to read than the bigger document that was shared before, and I apologize for not advancing, but Karen, are you there?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. All you.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. You're kind of very small, which is probably a good thing since it will probably help me be a little less nervous. And like Bob, very much appreciate the opportunity to partner with Mountain Line. Heather and the team are really tremendous leaders and advocates for the transit system up there in northern Arizona. But not just that, they really have a passion for community and for embedding in community and for messaging around how they are an important part of the community, which is partly kind of what I want to talk about a little bit in terms of opportunities. Unlike at the federal level, where everything is one party, here at the state, it's actually a divided government. We have a Democratic governor and we have very narrow margins, but the Republicans are in the majority in both the House and the Senate here, but again, with very slim majorities. We are in day 129 of a 100-day session. They continue to vote to kind of stop the clock. That's how they do that. The fiscal year ends June 30th. They are done with most of their actions related to specific bills and legislation, but are turning now to the budget, and they are under the gun to pass a budget by June 30th, or their money runs out. So they are scrambling to try to do that. The House gavelled in yesterday for a couple of bills, and that was really it. And then they gavelled back out. The Senate is coming back next week on Wednesday for one day for a couple of things, and then they're going to gavel out. The House is not coming back for 2 more weeks. I'm assuming that the Senate will gavel in at roughly that same time. In that downtime, they are negotiating the budget. One of the things that had been a sticking point was a DDD issue. There was some overspend in an area of adult caregivers, family as caregivers in that budget item. They cleaned that up, got that funded, and now they're turning to, or had thought they were going to turn to, extending funding for Proposition 123, which is a voter-approved initiative that takes money from the interest from the state land trust and carves it out specifically for education funding. That was on a 20-year track that is due to expire this year. I think they're going to set that aside. They are not going to approve that going to the voters this year. They cannot come to an agreement on that. But my understanding is that there is funding in the baseline budget. It's about $300 million that they have earmarked specifically for 1 year's worth of sort of floating for education funding. So they do have that 300 million, and they're just going to kick it down the can, or kick the can down the road until next legislative session, where the biggest talking point or the biggest sticking point is the Republicans want to codify and memorialize some faction of school choice policies in the language that goes to voters. And the Democrats are absolutely adamantly opposed to it and just want a straight up funding mechanism to continue funding for education. So all of that to say, budgets are always very contentious. This year is no different. And like years past, in recent years past, it's coming up right to the line, and we're no different this year. We're going to start losing members, though, in the middle of June, especially one of the key people, Representative Matt Gress in the House, former budget director for Governor Ducey. He has been very instrumental in these budget discussions, and he's getting married in Italy at the middle of June. So he'll be gone. So hopefully they have to get it done before then, or they won't get a budget. So everybody's watching, everybody's waiting to see how that all plays out. That as a backdrop, the tone and tenor of Republicans here in Arizona, unlike some other states, the Republicans here pride themselves on low taxes, small government, reduction in spending, waste and inefficiency, kind of tamping down on all of that. And that has been a more prevalent than ever in this particular session and last session. So we're coming up into an era of very little money, and they continue to try to find ways to decrease taxes when the demand for services continues to increase. So we're finding ourselves in that kind of place. However, much like at the federal level, transportation anyway is a very nonpartisan issue. Most most members agree transportation is important. It's a wise investment, and it is a proper function of government. The challenge for us being a transit provider is transit isn't included in that conversation. So our challenge is, how do we incorporate transit into those discussions about transportation and the importance of not just moving people around, but about economic development, about employment centers, about healthcare, about not just healthcare from an economic development perspective and helping people get to and employees get to their places of work, but how that impacts people's overall health. So that's some of the messaging that we have been talking about shaping how we are, transit and Mountain Line in particular, are part of our economy. Some of the opportunities that are out there that we have been engaging in, that we continue to participate in, are conversations around at the federal level. We were very instrumental, Heather especially was very instrumental in pushing changes in the way we do drug testing. For example, to allow for more ease of hiring for drivers. That was a national crisis, and Heather was at the tip of the spear on having those discussions at the federal level with not only federal members, but also with our FTA delegation members, with great success. The notion of under the hood, which is the CDL issue, in process, but we are tip of the spear again, and Heather, with her engagement at both the regional and the national level with various board memberships, committee memberships, relationships and networking that she has, and some of that due to Bob's good work and Nexus's good work, deepening relationships with our federal members. That messaging and those issues are also being addressed. We, at the local level here, one of the favorite things that I love to talk about for Mountain Line is that parcel of land behind the Casper facility is being developed now for workforce development. And that is a very unique aspect for Mountain Line that is an example of how we are engaging in the community. It's not just for our employees once it's built, it will be for the whole community. And that will go a very long way to solidify our standing as a member of the community. The Arizona Association of Civil Engineers has reached out and asked for our engagement and participation in challenges that we face as a transit agency in terms of funding and all manner of things. And we're in the process of doing a deep dive on, what that looks like, how we're responding. And it's really kind of a nice exercise for us as an organization to dig deep and respond. But it was interesting that we were invited to participate in that conversation. It's yet another example of, Heather being out in the community as a recognized leader. They found her and identified her as someone that would be good to get that information from and begin conversations about solutions around some of those challenges. One of the other things that we have really stepped up is identifying other transit agencies, whether they're active, small, about to be, want to be, communities that want transit agencies, identifying who those folks are, gathering them and inviting them to be part of our conversation about what the challenges are, what some of the solutions are, not necessarily funding, but where needs are the greatest, and how at the legislative level, at the federal level, where we can network together and find solutions together and work together. She's beginning that process too, or continuing that process too. So those are some of the things that don't necessarily have to do with funding. And then opportunities as they relate to funding is Arizona is one of 4 states that doesn't fund transit at all. And that's both a challenge and an opportunity, because for some people, it's a wake-up call. It's, well, why doesn't the state fund transit? Well, because we're a low tax, don't like to spend money on transit, inefficient, kind of an attitude, which is why the conversation around how we embed ourselves in the community is so important. The good thing is that there's agreement by most, whether they're conservatives, liberals, anywhere in the middle, all agree that there's a need for funding in transportation anyway, and then looping in that conversation about how we affect that larger conversation. There's an appetite to increase that, which I said. That there have been bills in the past at the state level to try to address the woeful inadequacy of the HERF fund in particular as it relates to road maintenance, which opens the conversation for what needs to be funded. And so in the last several years, the World Transportation Advocacy Council has come up with a priority project bill that is a list of priority projects collected and vetted from around the state, put into one bill, and then everybody has an opportunity to go in and talk to their specific legislators about why funding is important in rural areas for these specific projects. And Mountain Line has been engaged in that process. And in fact, I think has been a recipient of, of one of those through the SMART Fund, at least one. So that's an example of a bill that we are actively engaged in and being effective with. And then we're also continuing to advocate for the SMART Fund, which was originally instituted about 3 to 4 years ago by the state legislature, funded, and it is designed to be a local match program for rural entities for transit and transportation projects. And that has been hugely successful. It's dwindled in funding. It was not funded last year by the legislature. The executive budget this year appropriated 13 million in it. Representative Teresa Martinez, who's the vice chair of transportation, floated a bill this year that didn't go anywhere, but was advocating for 10 million to fund the SMART Fund, which would have been terrific. We know, back of the napkin kind of sketch, we need 33 million to fully fund it. With the budget situation being what it is, that there's very little money, if any. It's not likely to be capitalized again this year, but there is agreement by most at the legislature that it's a very good investment. There is good return on investment. So we continue to advocate to capitalize that fund. And Mountain Line has been a recipient of one, maybe even 2 projects for that. So all of that to say, we are really well positioned between our partners at the federal level and at the state level to continue to engage in a number of ways to be a part of the conversation about what the challenges are, some that are funding related, some that are not, but that we are a well-respected voice in that is really paying dividends for us. And I really appreciate being a part of the team, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Karen? Right.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank
So
you, everyone.
I'm going to close out our conversation. If you'll advance to the next slide, Rhonda. Mountain Line has been very engaged in reauthorization priorities. So we had a new opportunity this year that we've not had in the past, which is to issue our priorities for reauthorization. We certainly have been involved in the conversations. We actually started bringing reauthorization up a year ago, anticipating that there was going to be this challenge around reauthorization of funding as authorized under IIJA. And just as a reminder, IIJA brought a 30% plus up to our transit funding, the funding that we receive from the federal government. It's a significant investment in our community. So we knew it would be a hard fought battle to get that same amount of funding reauthorized. So we started bringing it up a while ago. Recently, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee offered an opportunity to submit your reauthorization priorities. Mountain Line engaged with the Arizona Transit Association and led an effort on rural Arizona, which Flagstaff falls under, and those priorities and as a group. And we submitted that under the ASTA umbrella, but we did not want to miss the opportunity to say, but what's important to us? There are things important to Mountain Line in a small urban community that are not the same as rural Arizona, that are not the same as Cottonwood's priorities for reauthorization. Some of their funding is different than ours. So we developed our own reauthorization priorities, which you can now see here on the screen. Everything in bold is something we share with the Arizona Transit Association effort. Those that are starred are items that we share with the Metro Plan reauthorization priorities that they too have submitted These reauthorization priorities have been shared with the city of Flagstaff and Coconino County. And really that's thanks to Kate Morley's leadership at MetroPlan. She coordinated a meeting of all of us to talk about reauthorization priorities. So we acted very quickly to develop these reauthorization priorities. They are reflective of the Community Transportation Association of America's priorities, the Southwestern Transit Association priorities, but really mostly represent what we need the most. And you'll see a lot of them are more about policy than funding. Of course, maintaining funding is number one, but really one of our objective is if we're gonna be fighting for money, how do we streamline what we do? How do we be more effective and more efficient? And so some of these are like reducing administrative burden. Are there things that we can do to eliminate either duplicate regulations or contradictory regulations, interestingly enough? These are the priorities that we've submitted. After submitting to the House TNI, we have also submitted these, thankful for the opportunity from Senator Gallego and Senator Kelly's offices. They ask for our priorities. We have already submitted these. It is a much longer document than the ones I have on here, and I can share that post this meeting. And we will be submitting, as mentioned to Bob earlier today, we are submitting those to Congressman Stanton. Those are due this week. So we're grateful to have the opportunity to say, hey, here's what we need. I try very hard for Mountain Line to always be at that table. Again, use our voice instead of counting on someone else to speak on our behalf. So grateful for the support of the city and the county and MetroPlan in setting these priorities, but wanted to share them with you. These priorities will definitely be part of what we ask for you to adopt as our future legislative priorities. And I will tell you, I don't have anything to share on the state of Arizona side, but to Karen's point, we're very focused on not necessarily money from the state, although that's always valuable, but how do we talk about policies? How do we talk about regulations that support transit and transit investment? Mountain Line loves to tell our economic impact story, and these priorities really reflect the way that we can share those economic impacts we have in our community and be part of our community. So with that, that's everything that I have, unless you have questions for me.
Questions for Heather?
I have a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
I'm curious about the commercial driver's license
Yes.
requirements, if you could dig a little deeper, and I'm wondering if you have any stats about, I mean, we've added Phoenix truck driving school
Yep.
and the course on Ingram's
Right.
campus, like, have we seen an increase in that area? Could you share? that with
Yeah,
us?
so maybe I'll tell you a little bit about what we're asking for in the CDL requirement, because I think that's really important. Is we're asking for a CDL basically to be created that's for transit and transit operations. It would also include school districts. So it removes an element called under the hood. Under the hood is important when you're in an 18-wheeler out on the freeway by yourself with no mechanics around. That is not the environment that school districts and transit districts operate under. So by removing that, that's one of 3 testing elements essentially in the CDL program. It's the highest element of failure in our staff when they're going through the training and testing program. So by removing it, you just remove a testing element. We have all talked about, and I'm looking at Sam, but we have really talked about as transit industry, we would still teach it. We would still expect our drivers to know how to know if the oil is low. That's really important, but it wouldn't be part of their certified license. So I'll add that just on the CDL piece so you understand what's here. But towards, has the CDL course helped? Has the partnership with CCC helped? Yes. Right now, knock on wood, Mountain Line is very close to fully staffed, and we really have floated in that close to staff for over a year. We went back to full service. We've been able to support that with our staffing. So yes, we still think that this is an important component. One of the things that happens with CDL, and Rafi could probably acknowledge this too, is that the trucking industry continues to steal our employees. We get them, they come to us, we train them for free, we help them get their CDL, and then they say, thank you, bye-bye, and they go work for the trucking industry. So again, this licensing helps segregate an employment group for us. Thanks, you're welcome.
Right, any other questions for Heather?
Here, just real quick, if I may, I have a question for Heather and for Karen. By the way, I know Karen, her husband served on the Madison School Board with me. And I know Karen works there too. Have you coordinated that with, because we just dealt with that last night. The SBA, Arizona School Boards Association, legislative policies about, this is something I think that should be on their list. I don't think it is right now. Karen, has that been? That would be very helpful for school districts as well.
So I'll start, and if Karen wants to join in, she can. So the whole idea about this came about because school districts got a waiver on the under the hood testing element. So we went to Federal Motor Carrier and said, hey, we want a waiver too, and they wouldn't give us one. So then we started this conversation about, well, then maybe it's time to change the regulations. And the biggest thing with Federal Motor Carrier is that they want to know the regulation doesn't deprioritize safety. And what we're asking for doesn't change safety. So this is something we have been talking about for a while, again, triggered by this waiver that we learned school districts got. But it's been picked up. All of the national transit associations are now using the same language. So we're glad to not just be a small voice in a very large conversation, but to be a voice amongst many that are having this conversation. So no, I've not talked to the school board association specifically. And part of that's, we've treated it separately since they have their own waiver. But certainly our conversations, when we say it, we keep saying, this is just like the school. School districts everywhere are struggling with CDL, just like transit.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us, Bob, Tracy, Karen. Appreciate your insight. On to FY 26 budget and financial plan. We got Josh.
Hi, Josh Stone, financial manager with Mountain Line. So this is actually gonna be kind of a three-part. I'm gonna start us off and then Jackie has to speak, but she'll be back.
Jackie should pronounce the PowerPoint presentation. I'm very worried the next slide will be too small.
Jackie is will do a little bit of a financial outlook for us, financial plan, and then Heather has some wrap up and a few other things. So we have been talking over the last since February about all of the various expenses that are in our developed budget for next year. The next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2026. So today, we hopefully all of you had an opportunity to view the budget that we sent out. Today we're going to talk about the revenue side of that, which we haven't done to date, and see how paper. So we have a variety of available revenue sources to us. Federal is the money that Congress has appropriated and is administered through the Federal Transit Administration. I'll talk about those a little bit and how they're they've increased, and they right now they make up about a third of our operating revenue. Pay for about a third of our we not included on here under federal is any congressionally directed spending that we might try to apply for if available, and if that's to be awarded by or built into the federal budget, then that would be something that would be available to us. The city is, of course, our city's transit tax. And then we have capital contributions, which is really kind of a thing that we have right now. It's not typically transit tax would cover our capital. Right now, this year, we have a grant that we are working on with that is for first time, last time, so I'm looking for it. That is so the city is providing, it's our grant that we received. The city is providing the capital outside of the transit tax for these bike and pedestrian projects. We have NAU. NAU provides a operating contribution to the bus program for operation of Route 10 through campus. That all students are able to ride for free. The county provides our local match for operation of the van pool, which is anything that starts in the city and goes out far-flung areas. The taxi and the taxi program for taxi clients that are outside of our regular service operating area and further outside of those boundaries. And then we have fares, which would be which is kind of a decreasing over time portion. We have expanded the amount of discounted fare or category that people that can pay or receive discounted fares over time. So fares are sort of a necessary but fill-in portion of the budget. And these also include this would also include any like service or operating contracts that we have with everybody's available, they pay for their service that they use. Not included on here is ADOT. Karen talked about the state not as habit donating giving money to the transit programs. They administer federal programs, federal grant funds that are passed through, but they generally don't dedicate in their own budget. We do have this year, the Arizona Smart Fund is built into our revenue budget as an available funding source. So, and also not included on here is advertising revenue. So we have a couple $100,000 a year. We have a fairly robust advertising program that there's usually a couple $100,000 a year that we collect. We don't currently dedicate it directly to operating. I don't think our IGA would specify that is supposed to go anywhere specific. So it's kind of has historically grown over time and is as set aside, and we use it for little projects. So I'll say that the fares also includes EcoVest program, which most, I think, all your organizations participate in for employees. So for partner request, so the city of Flagstaff requests that we submit our budget to them very early in our year. So we have to submit like by February, mid-February, what our transit tax funding request is going to be. And then that is built into the city's budget that slowly makes its way through all through the winter and spring until its adoption. The city is really just the fiscal agent for the transit tax, all dedicated to us. But it still has to be worked into their budget to be spent. So, NAU, we talked about that. NAU, we, typically, since we have to prepare city's budget request early in the year, we typically will, send a request to NAU, what our operating, request will be, around that same time, February-ish. And that is, I'll say limited to the amount that we can request from NAU was set at the start of Route 10 when that served, which was maybe 2014. Well, I don't know. I think 2012. And is kind of limited in growth. By our agreement, we can only increase, well, we increase by the amount of the school price index. So whatever the previous 12 months of school price index says inflation amount, we can have to plus an increase historically the consumer price index is not exactly tracked with our expense increase. So over time, that's kind of a declining portion of the operating interest. Available funding for that. And then Coconino County, I don't meant to go back and look, but we have had the same budget for a number of years. And we have not really modified it at all. I think there's opportunity for other partnerships with that, but it's kind of set to what it is for right now. So, yes, that is all I have. Okay, so talking about all of those, so now we have hopefully a very concise chart that everybody can see. That. So our budget for this next year is $60 million. Right, bring it down as to where the revenue is coming from here. I'll say that the other local line is the city's contribution to the first mile, last mile bicycle and pedestrian projects, and it's a combination of that and the Arizona Smart Funds, which will be our local match to the Federal Transit Administration capital grants. So this is actually a little bit of an unusual year that the operating and capital revenue are very similar for the city of Flagstaff. That just kind of happens. The capital expenses this upcoming year are quite large with the projects that are going on, and bus purchases and other things like that. So typically that would be a smaller amount, but I'll say this: the city of Flagstaff transit tax is, I didn't say this before, that is kind of like the last fill-in after everything else. So that line does not get determined until everybody else's contributions to the budget are worked out, and then we fill in that whatever is necessary to operate everything and to complete all the capital projects with the transit tax. So the The federal $3 million there is our earmark request for this year, which we have no idea if we will get that or not. So if we don't, we will figure out how much of that we can pay for with the transit tax. Otherwise, we'll maybe defer some of them or reprioritize there a little bit. Those are not that's not dedicated funds at this time. ADOT pass-through is for the operation of primarily our paratransit services. And those are federal programs, but that money is apportioned to the states. We apply for those funds and ADOT passes them through to us. So I think about it. Do we have any questions?
I got a question, Josh.
Sure.
Not having all the perspective, with FY25, I noticed that the big number that sticks out to me is that $31 million on the capital side for the from the FTA. Is that typical?
It has been in recent years, because we have the DCC project, we have the PBL horse, this upcoming year, we have the building of the expanded maintenance facility. So I would say it's that sort of magnitude when there's larger capital projects, but it's not forever that large.
But it's, half the budget there just sort of sticks out. Okay. Any other questions for Josh?
I'm David Spence with City Council. As many of you know, there are people in our community that are asking about, could we go fare free as an equity measure for low income people that depend on the bus, but have a hard time making their bills each month. And my question is, what would be the impact on ridership if Mountain Line were to go fare free?
Yep. I'm happy to attempt to answer the question, and I'd be happy to meet with you offline as well. Free fare has been a discussion amongst the board and the TAC for the last couple of years. There is a financial impact to it. Our fare collection is roughly $800,000. That's cash on the bus or past sales. Going fare free means I have to replace that $800,000. There's a large assumption, and many of the board members know this, that there's a cost to collecting fare that makes fare collection not profitable. Wrong word, but hopefully expresses the sentiment. Our fare collection is very low. The cost of fare collection is extremely low. So if we went fare free, we would save maybe $100,000 a year in fare collection, but I'd still have $700,000 in revenue to make up. You are correct in that it's expected if you go fare free, you would generate more ridership. But this board, as part of the transit tax conversation, made a decision that we wanted to take and ask the public for public investment, increase taxes to expand our service programs versus going fare free at this time. We did just talk about that a month ago. So again, I'd be happy to go over the history of that with you. And I know Councilmember Garcia has reached out today with a similar question. This does percolate. We're always happy to have the conversation. Just at this time, we don't have the funding capacity to consider going fare free. And there's a lot of reasons that I, as the CEO, would not recommend we go fare free.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Josh?
Josh, we're going to jump down, Jackie went to get the printouts and is taking forever to print them out. But I actually have a response to board questions about travel. So I'd like to go to that slide and talk about that, and then we'll come back. Maybe we'll take our break, Rhonda, grab lunches. And then by then, Jackie can get back and we'll do the financial plan, maybe while you're eating lunch. Well, I wanted to share with you, the question was, Mountain Lion is seeking a 20% increase to travel and training budget. So I wanted to kind of respond to the question of why, what is it for? And there's multiple reasons for the increase. And I'm just gonna go through a couple of facts, but I'm happy to answer any questions regarding this. I mean, it's nuanced in and of itself. One big chunk of our increase, $4,000, is an increase that happens whenever we have bus procurements. We are required to send our team to the bus manufacturer to do on-site inspections as a result of the order and the delivery. It's part of our handshake with the federal government for the federal funding, is that we will go to the factory and do these inspections for Buy America, for safety and other reasons. So in this year, we are slated to take delivery of vehicles. So we have included that $4,000 expenditure in our travel budget. The one thing about a budget, an expenditure budget, is it doesn't show how the costs are being paid for. So that $4,000, just as one example, is funded through our grant to buy the buses, but we still have to demonstrate it as an increase in our expenditures. So the total budget of $95,000 that's proposed for fiscal year 2026 includes travel and or training for 28 different staff members. So some of these are webinars that staff pay to participate in. Some of these are people traveling to DC, to conferences, or participating in offsite training opportunities or conference opportunities. The average budget per staff member that's included here is around $3,200 annually. A single conference on the national average is $2,800 per person. So this is really 28 people attending one conference per year, one training opportunity per year. Conferences or training are generally 2.5 days. Hotel rates are up 10% from a year ago. Registration rates for us and these training opportunities and conferences are up between 10 and 15%. So those all roll out into this increase in our budget. I will also say that in last year's budget, we budgeted only 18 people to travel. This year, we're doing 28 people. So those are all the reasons that we are proposing this increase. And I would only add one other thing, that I've illustrated that the $4,000 for the bus manufacturing is grant funded, but many of these opportunities are actually funded through our grant resources.
Heather, I have a question. So the 28 people that typically travel, is that all in the administrative department, or is that drivers, or?
So it does include training, not necessarily travel, for a lot of staff.
But the 28 people are travel?
So this is travel and training.
Okay.
So they're not mutually exclusive. We don't have a travel budget and a training budget. It's all one. So around 15 of these are virtual trainings. So around $24,000, 15 people is virtual training opportunities for those staff. We don't necessarily pay for them to travel, but we pay for them to attend virtual trainings.
And can you say again what kind of training that is?
It varies. Sometimes it's defensive driving, sometimes it's drug and alcohol, sometimes it's how to be a leader. I'm looking to Sam to give me some other examples. Like our ops soups team right now is doing a lot of training on how to be operations supervisors, how to move from peer to boss, if you will, because they're promotional jobs. In NTD, our National Transit Database, is an annual requirement. There's a training every year that you're required to attend to do that report. We do it virtually when we can. Sometimes they're not available. So it's a wide gamut of training opportunities, sometimes travel, sometimes not.
So one other question, is there any opportunity to break out travel and training? Because those are two, I mean, it's both travel and training, you know, is focused on the employees for their investment or knowledge or whatever, but it just seems like it'd be nice to know what's training.
Okay.
And what we're traveling to, and just having it kind of blend together. leaves a lot of questions like, you know, how many people are going to conferences, you know, how many people are actually training virtually or training, you know, required training and stuff, so.
We could certainly implement that. It's not what we currently have implemented and we've never done that before. Again, not that we can't do it if that is the board's direction, but we have used this function for years. And part of the reason for that is, as one example, one of the annual events that I attend, Community Transportation Association of America Conference, this year is in San Diego, California. My travel costs are next to nothing to do that. So then we're able to use the savings from that trip to give somebody else a training opportunity. And when they're blended, that's not always as readily available. We have to do budget revisions to change it. So it allows us the most flexibility in how to use the funds within that set budget limit. But if it is the board's desire to see them separately, we can certainly look.
We can have a further discussion on it, but just $100,000 is a lot of money. And it would be really good to know like what part is required training and then what is travel for conferences and stuff. It would be helpful to me.
Okay.
I want to add to that, that I think knowing, I'm sure you have like certain trainings that are required, like you're the CEO of the organization, you have to go to this conference to get certified for whatever it is. So what's professional development versus what's a required training? I think that would be kind of helpful to see in the full scheme of, if it's easy to break that. Sometimes professional development, you have to skip a year, right?
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Again, if that's what the board and like to see us separate those out, we can certainly attempt to do that and come back with that information. I would argue that $100,000 budget for 107 people is a very small travel and training budget. But I appreciate your
Oh, is this for
perspective.
107 people? I
This
thought it
is
was for 28.
But it's 28 people that are taking advantage of it, but we have 107 people in our agency.
Sure.
So each year during the budget process, I'm just going to point to Sam. Sam works with his team of 5 people and says, what opportunities do you want to take advantage of this year? And then that creates the budget. So for example, this budget includes 1 travel or training for each of his 5 staff members. For Jeremiah, similarly, I think it's 1 training for 5 of his 8 staff members. So yes, we can certainly detail out how much of this is me traveling to conferences or Jackie traveling to conferences and training, or how many of this is frontline staff going to training opportunities.
Any other questions? We were gonna break for lunch.
Yes, that sound okay if we break for lunch and then come back? Yes. So why don't we take a 30-minute break? And we'll come back and do the financial plan and then move on to the rest of the agenda.
I did make 6, I did kill
Staff that have
I made 6 copies, I could not bear to do all 6. So does not have a device where you can see. I'll put stuff back on that table and then you can share with neighbors. Would have been there and if I had printed out.
And see what our chance are we missing. If I'm not at these conferences, how are we?
I think the 3 o'clock is hard for you.
Meetings, like I'm.
Sure.
Everything here, I'm just gonna put the.
Yes.
Perfect.
Oh, that one, sorry. Okay. Was it, no, that was fine, I should be done. And as a reminder, I did put the printouts over by the drinks over there, that those of you would like a printout of anything, please. We like to have a few slides that will have the need in the upcoming one.
Just consider this.
Time for me to go.
A little bit, these one, and
Do we go ahead and get started?
Thank
Okay. Sorry, it was just as a reminder that I did put some printouts back by the weeks. If you like a printout, I don't know exactly where we are right now. It was slightly where we're at, but about halfway through. So this is a continuation of what Josh was speaking of, our financial plan looking over through 24. So, as you heard from Bob and Tracy earlier in this presentation, or this meeting, there's actually uncertainty at the federal level. And so we, as we're looking to do financial projections, are uncertain of what things will look like from the federal level. If things will be as they are today, if there'll be less, if there'll be more. And there's always uncertainty when it comes to reauthorization. But I think we feel like this particular one probably brings a higher level there. So we've actually got 3 sort of financial plan scenarios that we are that we're looking at, and we'll start to home in on as we get more information, as we get more certainty around the IIJA and the reauthorization. One thing that I will add, I shared with a couple of you that I had the opportunity to attend the American Public Transit Association's legislative conference earlier this week in Washington, DC, which was a very fascinating conference and a very fascinating experience to be there. But one thing that I did, so we had a lot of great speakers. So Department of Transportation Secretary Duffy was in attendance and gave a welcome address and gave in overall in support of transit. He has some priorities, and the priorities are access for families to transit, safety, fare evasion, and they've his administration already taken aim at some of the larger systems, the New York, the Washington DC, with this information. Not as much the smaller system, but there was a lot of support for small urban and rural systems. 2 of the speakers that spoke on different days, one was Rick Larson, who is a Democratic congressman from the state of Washington, and Sam Graves, who is a Republican congressman from the state of Missouri. And they are the ranking members of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. And if you ever need to have a bit of hopefulness about bipartisanship, I highly suggest listening to these 2 gentlemen speak. They are in lockstep with each other. They both came into Congress at the same time and have risen to these positions of authority in this committee. And they both said the same exact thing. Which I love the most is, this is not a committee about getting on TV. If you want to be on TV, go find another committee. This is a committee about getting things done, which I really appreciate it. And they are committed to getting it out of their committee by the end of the year. The surface transportation out of their committee by the end of the year. So it was very hopeful, I would say, in their messaging, and there was a lot of reiteration from several of the people that spoke at this conference about the need to renew at the current level and take inflation into account as well. So with that being said, we are going to present 3 possible scenarios for financial plans looking forward. So, and then I am going to come up later and talk about Proposition 488 and implementation of it, and these 2 things do kind of go together. But this first scenario is one where it's the FY26 budget, as Josh presented earlier. It includes things like electric bus transition, phase 2 the downtown connection center. It includes late night service. It also factors in a renewal of, or a situation where IIJA or bipartisan infrastructure law goes back to pre-IIJA funding levels, so the previous surface authorization. So the funding level would go down. That is assuming a worst case scenario with the reauthorization of the service transportation bill. This one in particular does not include additional service to new areas. Let's see, I probably should have had a presentation first now that I'm talking, but we are bringing service to new areas in July. We are extending our Route 8 out to Woody Mountain Road. What else got it? So we are checking that box, if you will, of bringing service to new areas, but it is not just that one service addition. It's not the spirit of what we had intended when we said service to new areas. We really wanted to have the flexibility as Flagstaff continues to develop and grow to bring service to new areas where transit service is most needed. So this is looking at the situation with less federal funding than we have now, implementing Proposition 488, but not including service to new areas outside of the extension of route. So as you can see, as we start to implement the data that goes down, and it's level out after that, they really don't roll back. Okay. Then this very not pretty graph. Other this scary graph. So this is the same funding assumption. So assuming a decline and decrease in that federal funding level, but assuming a full implementation of Proposition 488. So at some point in that 2030 area, adding an entire new route to a new area. And so as you can see, that breaks that thing. If our federal funding is rolled back to those pre-IIJA levels, so that clearly is not a sustainable thing moving forward to do that full-blown service to new areas outside of that Route 8 that we are applying. And we purposely didn't put lines on a map when we went for Proposition 488 about service to new areas. I know we're getting something that comes through with requesting our comments on it for yes process every week. There's so many new developments, new things that are, I think is those who are working at the city know, so many new things coming up. We actually are going to be doing an operational assessment. I can't remember if that was brought up earlier, but we have we'll be doing an operational assessment, which is really looking at, it's kind of a leading into our new 5-year plan, but looking at our current routing. We've not looked at our current routing in quite some time. So, there are things like this that look scary right now, but there's also, we have plans to, like I said, do this operational assessment, which really will look at our current operations and how we do everything from an operational standpoint to see where efficiency can be, where maybe things can be routed differently to be more efficient and still serve the same areas. So then I'm going to move on to the happier story. This is the ideal scenario. So this would be the reauthorization of surface transportation at the current funding levels. So even not taking inflation into account, the current funding levels for the bipartisan infrastructure law and full implementation of Proposition 488. So everything, you'll see my presentation later, and we'll can talk about in Proposition 488 for the next service, the service to new areas, more frequent service. The electric bus, all of these do include this the continued transition to electric vehicles. So this is the scenario that we are hoping we will see, and we are trying to plan for. We're trying to understand the ramifications of the worst case scenario. We'll also, be behind the scenes doing everything that we can. We mentioned the work that we're doing with Bob and Tracy in DC to really fight for the flat reauthorization. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So one other, if I may, one thing I would point out, if you think about the reauthorization priorities, one of the reauthorization priorities that Mountain Line has really gotten behind is the stick set aside, moving from 3% to 4%. And if that happens, that's not new federal money. It just changes to ensure more of that money comes our way, because we currently get all 6 of the small transit intensive city benchmarks. When that benchmark went from 2 to 3%, our funding increased by 30% just alone. So if the 4% goes through, there's still an opportunity for us to achieve more money than we're even showing here, because we have shown it at the 3%. Because small transit intensive cities benchmarks are all about performance and demonstrating performance, we believe that asking the set aside to be moved from 3 to 4% would be favored by our current administration, which is really talking about, show us that you're performing, show us you have an economic impact. And we believe that Mountain Learning prides itself on how well we perform with our KPIs and our storytelling. So just wanted to illustrate, to point that out. This does not show any of the reauthorizations outside of Poland. Thank you.
Questions? Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
On to next agenda item. Izzy with zero emission bus transition plan update.
Thank you. So we have, so I brought this item to the board a couple of times now. We did complete the zero emission transition plan. The link was included in your agenda packet. Hopefully you got an opportunity to review if you were interested. I'm just going to show the results today. I'm happy to answer any questions. Staff is looking for consent approval in June of this plan on a policy level. So if there's any feedback that you have to finalize the plan, I'd be happy to take time today and make those changes happen for June. So here, total cost of ownership. I think this is the big bottom line of the ZEP transition plan. Zero emission bus transition. I'm going to refer to it as ZEP plan from here on out. It's a mouthful. So overall, we analyzed 3 scenarios pictured here. So our baseline is the hybrid diesel buses that we have today. They work great for us. They do save some emissions over a typical diesel bus. A depot charging option where our buses would only be charged at the Casper facility overnight, not on route, so just overnight. And then the en route and depot charging scenario. I might refer to this as just the en route, but this concept is that there are chargers at on the route at the Downtown Connection Center and the Mall Connection Center, as well as at our depot for overnight charging. There is a 4th alternative, fuel cell electric, and we did look at this option in 2020 when we completed the first ZEP plan. But since that plan found that it was significantly higher at cost over the baseline hybrid compared to hybrid and the battery electric bus options, and lower emission savings, the circumstances have not changed and it was not updated for this plan. So it's still an option out there. It still doesn't make sense for us at this time. So these are the options that were reanalyzed for this plan. Okay. So a couple important outcomes came from this update. So in the 2020 ZEP plan, we were under the assumption that we are impacted by peak demand charges by APS, Arizona Public Service. We learned in the 2025 ZEP plan that we are not. We can choose between a time of use plan or a general plan. We're on the general plan, so therefore we are not impacted by demand charges during the peak times. So that is huge. That's a huge cost savings to us. We can charge all day. It really changed the cost of fuel in red here on the en route charging scenario, because if we're charging en route, we're going to be charging during peak times in the afternoon, weekdays. So that was a huge discovery in this plan. So we're identifying that in the full 15-year transition, when we get to 100% electric buses, zero emission, that the fuel savings would be 4.7 million compared to our current hybrid diesel option. So a huge savings. We actually saw in the 2020 plan that it was about 30% increase in fuel costs. So that's changed dramatically for us. So that's huge. Another huge outcome was reconfirming that the en route and depot charging scenario makes the most sense for us based on our climate, topography, and service structure at the time of the study. And then the last outcome is that MCC was added as an on-route charging location. So in the first ZEP plan, we only identified Downtown Connection Center.
as our on-route charging location because all buses go through there. Makes sense. Mall Connection Center, we have about half of our routes accessing it today. The operational assessment may identify additional routes being served through that area. So it makes sense and serves our needs. We also have constraints of the Downtown Connection Center for our on-route charging. So it's just like, it just all came together. It was great that we have these other alternative locations. So the update was very helpful to just clarify a lot of aspects of our original ZEB plan. So as I mentioned, on-route and depot charging scenario does make sense for us. The cost difference is 31 million over the hybrid diesel through, again, that's a 15-year transition period that we're looking at. So it's a ton of money because it's quite a while, right? 15 years. And this is cumulative fleet fuel maintenance costs through 2040. So it's the lowest cost compared to our hybrid diesel. And we also saw that it has the highest emission savings. So again, this comes from the 2020 plan. We did not update our emissions outcomes, but we definitely see these as still being valid. So here is our depot only. We're at a 66% saving over hybrid diesel. Our on-route charging scenario is 68. So that's the highest percentage of greenhouse gases among the options. It's really interesting. Yeah, I did include the fuel cell here, so you can see some of the emission savings. So again, they're not quite hitting that battery electric mark. And so staff do see two clear options: continue with hybrid diesel or transition to on-route charging. And staff also find it very important to honor the 2008 voter intent to adopt low and zero emission bus technologies as our fleet expands and is replaced. And this will be my last slide here. So another interesting outcome. So the first plan did not, they talked about the product management system, it's not a high level. Here we actually did an analysis of cost savings using a charge management system. So charge management is really important when you're impacted by peak charges. So you can like shift when charging, you can shift loads. There's just a lot of back-end control over your charging. And ideally to help you save money, according to the utility rates. Because we're not impacted by peak demand charges, so scenario 2, here's our on-route charging is the green, it's the lower cost. Purple is our depot only battery electric option. Nope, I'm so sorry. So this is all in scenario 2, on-route charging. The purple is our CMS cost and the green is our demand cost savings, so that peak demand. So they don't cross. So the cost savings does not actually save us enough money to pay for the charge management system itself. So the recommendation of the plan is the cost savings isn't there for it, but there's a lot of other value in a charge management system that does equal some money. It doesn't show on this analysis, but it is of value to Mountain Line. So making sure that all of our data is in one place and compared to apples, that's a huge value for a charge management system. Less staff time touching the bus, so there's more like technical control and less human control for some of the charge management. So that doesn't come into play here. There is no labor costs associated here. So there are a lot of other factors that staff need to evaluate. And that's something we'll be doing at the display over time. Is evaluating the usefulness of a charge management system. Okay, next steps. I'd be happy to accept any feedback today and I'll incorporate that into the final plan. Again, the ZEB plan is guidance on how to transition to 100% electric. It's a living document and circumstances will change. They've already changed since we published this and Mountain Line needs to pivot. So staff will continue to evaluate electric implementation project by project, bus by bus. This is not, the approval in June does not mean that we're going all electric all the way. It means it still makes sense, but we're going to evaluate it every choice along the way. And with that, I'll accept any questions you might have.
Questions for Busy?
Hey, Busy.
Hey.
I'm glad we connected during the conference. That was awesome. How often will you guys plan the review and updates? You talked about initiating, right, every step of the way, but what does that look like? Is that once a month? Is that a quarter? Like, what does that plan look like? And then obviously, how do you communicate that to all the stakeholders?
That's wrong, thank you. So the evaluation, we have a zero emission bus working group. Internally, we do meet monthly, we talk about, a standing agenda, operating concerns, procurement, implementation, testing, just like a lot of topics that we regularly touch on. At the last meeting, we were really talking about like, gosh, is 2 chargers at the DCC enough? Like the limitation on that, can we really survive with just 2 chargers at the DCC? So we deep dived, using the ZEP plan and then working in like what we understand throughout the transition. So we're absolutely evaluating it on a monthly basis, and then those procurement decisions are kind of built into that monthly meeting, but also on that annual basis when the capital improvement program is decided. So there's a lot of options for evaluation.
Risk management is part of the evaluations, I'm sure.
Absolutely, risk management is part of that. Thank you. Yes.
Hey, I have a question. Bob told us earlier that a lot of these words that are in your report are not good words for the federal government. So how does that impact, or how much, can you talk a little bit about how that played into your plan?
Absolutely, yeah, and so that project by project, bus by bus, this is
Yeah.
definitely part of, funding is part of that. So, as you all know, we presented a few months ago on the 4 electric buses that we had on order. The executive orders come out and can't have electric as part of that, so we pivoted, right? So that's part of this whole living document approach, is like, making sure that we can pivot when we're evaluating and then when circumstances change. Did that answer your question? There was more to your
I
question.
didn't know that there was 4 buses that were.
Yeah, please.
I can speak to that. I apologize. It went directly to the board.
Oh,
So we had an order for 4 battery electric buses based on an award that was given to us in 2022. And there was a flurry of activities on executive orders saying, don't use this language anymore. The challenge was the funding specifically for those vehicles expires in September. I have to get it obligated this season. And so we went to the board and said, it's better to have replacements than not. So let's pivot. The original award was actually low emission, not no emission. So we pivoted, we did hybrids for our next 4 replacements. The objective of having this plan is so that when we are ready, when the industry's ready, when the federal government is ready to reconsider, we know what to do next. This was to ensure our financial plan has the capacity for this transition, should we continue down that path. But as Busy said, this is meant to guide decisions, not make decisions. And so every time we buy a bus, we have 2 additional ones we still need to make a decision on. They are awarded as a 0 emission. I did get permission from ADOT, who was the award grantor, that we could do low emission. The city of Flagstaff said, can you just hold off? If those funds aren't at risk, hold off. Again, trying to respect what the 2008 initiative was, respect what we told voters in Prop 488 as well. We may still end up with hybrids on those 2. But again, this document just helps us plan financially, should we continue to transition, but it will be made on a base by base. There are agencies still getting battery electric vehicles with federal funds. So it's not that they aren't happening. Our biggest concern was the delay in this application that included lapsing funds. So we didn't want to get caught in that. To Bob's point, I know of at least 1 grantee who went in and just replaced every 0 emission reference with no emission, and their grant went right through. So it's very interesting, the dynamics around a lot of this. And there was a full audit done of IIJA. There's nothing illegal about processing grants for battery electric buses. It's all covered by IIJA. So if you're applying for money that's covered by law, technically you should be allowed to spend it. Again, our goal here is to give us a planning document, but not to say we're going full steam ahead and putting the ability to obtain federal funds at risk. We won't do that.
it's great additional info. Thanks.
Did the APX, with demand, was that, last year in carbon station?
It's out there, it's a plan that's available, we just thought we were required to do to do the time of use. That was the guidance we got in 2020, and now APS is saying, no, you can choose between the plans, general or time of use. So that's available. It's a commercial plan. And then every size, so we're in the large size with the amount of electricity we're pulling. So every size, large, medium, small, the general or time use.
But is that metered separately than your other facilities?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I had a question on your first, the bar graph.
Yeah.
It seems a little counterintuitive to me that the en route and depot scenario would be a lower cost. Can you walk through why what that difference is between just charging at the depot and at the depot?
Absolutely. And so we're focused on the red, the fuel. That's what you're questioning?
The entire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just explain this graph more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, busy, it's because you guys need more, if you're doing depot only, you need more buses. That's why, so if you look at the fleet number specifically, that's where the biggest difference is. So if you only are charging at the depot, you can't get one bus to run the full route all day. So you need at least two to replace every one diesel. Sorry for jumping in. No experience with buses.
Aaron's totally right.
Yeah, but that's the big.
I want to point out is that this update did look at the changes in technology. So our prior update was based on the technology the day that the report was written and adopted. This report, I really appreciate the contractor, which by the way was a grant funded update to this contract, to this project, we paid nothing. Is they really looked at what are the battery changes going to be. So it helped us determine that when we get to on route and depot scenario, we didn't have to buy all those buses that we thought we would because the battery technology is changing so quickly. We only have a couple of routes that won't make it all day that require that on route charging in future technologies, not the technology that exists today. Now with the defunding of battery electric buses, who knows what will actually change in that technology, but I'm really grateful that this talks about future battery capacity and not just today's battery capacity.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Vinny? Right. Thank you. Right, and on to Anne. The Downtown Connection Center space.
Thanks, gonna shift thoughts other than thinking about buses, thinking about civic space here. Today I'm going to be seeking just general feedback from the board. There's a recommendation here. The Downtown Connection Center civic space, as many of you are aware, is part of our Downtown Connection Center project. It has been since the beginning a phased, really we call it part of our phase 2. It's been part of how we funded and got through our city approvals is our commitment to building civic space with this project. So we are very committed to building this. We obviously there's some challenges with construction of phase 2 for the downtown the DCC with the Big Flag project, which is still playing out. But really today I want to get some feedback because this presentation is actually going to the June 17th City Council. For their review. The Connection Center is actually, excuse me, the civic space is a partnership actually with the city. So, you know, we had our original plan with enhanced sidewalks and seating. We also use the civic space for snow removal, and it's a very large area to remove snow in the future after our operation was built. So, really the idea is to partner with the city on the civic space. We're partnering with community investment and pros, Parks and Rec. So we've had a lot of engaging conversations with them. We have gone to city commissions this spring. We went to the beautification group, Arts and Beautification, and Parks and Rec as well in the last month. We've had some feedback, but the partnership with the city is more about enhanced amenities above and beyond sidewalks and multimodal connectivity. So I'll be showing you kind of the bubble diagram, but I wanted to kind of give a little more background here on kind of where we're at in the process. So amenities that the city would like to see as part of this project. And then we'll be going in June, so precursor, and again, more feedback here so that we can incorporate that presentation. That will be given by the city's team with Mountain Line support to City Council. And following the feedback from council, depending on the outcome, we will have kind of a better sense of our concept, and we'll be confident to move forward towards like a 60% plan development of design. Then we would also engage the city in a more detailed agreement related to the civic space. So a little reminder on our overall plan. Obviously, we have our phase 1, which is opening to the public on June 9th. Really excited. Phase 2, the middle operations hub with 13 bus bays. That design is on pretty much on hold. I mean, we're going to be catching up with that because we will wait till the Rio is constructed. That's a whole separate step. But this far east side is the civic space. And that's the area that we're talking about here. And all of this was really memorialized in our downtown convention center with IWA city, and also this is on our conditional use permit. So again, this is the far end where the Rio, floodwaters kind of run under Biff's Bagels, that kind of undeveloped area adjacent to the city. And I like this slide. If it's a little hard, I guess, but from a distance, you can compare the size we're looking at of the civic space with Heritage Square. That's over in the purple on the far right, that polygon compared to this yellow here. It's actually just a little bit smaller than Heritage Square. So that gives you an idea of the area we're looking at to develop. There are a lot of constraints in this location. It is, obviously the Rio flag is the big sweeping blue confluence line there. There's a lot of other utilities. The area in yellow is actually considered to be in the floodplain, which you can have some development in the floodplain if you have certain mitigations. The area called park space is actually in the floodway, which is an area we really can't do much of until it's considered out of the floodway. And so after the city and Army Corps do the Rio, they still need to remap all of the area. So even after the Rio is done, it still could be a while after before all this is remapped. So this concept really looks at developing a civic space and then a kind of a naturalized park area, kind of just better using that as a natural space. So a little background on how we got to this bubble diagram, as I call it. Back in 2020, we started as part of our overall downtown connect. We did the outreach on the civic space and got some feedback. That's the concept that went to the conditional use permit that was kind of shown with this concentric circles. Pretty straightforward kind of concept. Since then, there was more interest in adding more amenities, and we went out to the public in January of 23 with the help of our consultants and got feedback from community, a lot of South Side neighbors, and really they came up with several things that they're you're seeing here. A lot of desire for obviously a lot of natural, a lot of movement. People were thinking about the Rio. They were thinking about just moving through the area. It's a very active. It's a lot of energy in that area. So those are some of the themes. A lot of modern and uplifting. Again, it's kind of a with the redevelopment of some part of the South Side, there's, that is one of the themes, celebrating cultural activities and just people in space in that area. So these are some of the themes that developed the concept. And so I'll run through several slides, but this is the overall, I call it the bubble diagram. It's just showing components of what's possible. With respect to the constraints that we develop. And I'll go into each of these in the next slides. But one of the components that's important, I think, with the civic space, the partnership with the city will actually maintain the space and be the actually Parks and Rec, Amy Hagen's team. So that's being kind of baked into this whole project is with that approach. So first off, a lot of, trees, but trees we're not putting in the ground because there's a lot of constraints. So trees up in planters that can be movable, and Amy Hagan identified this as something that, she had hundreds of trees downtown, which over time is really challenging when they're in the ground. So she really liked this type of a concept. And the Parks and Rec Commission also, as they looked at the details, they were very supportive of this type of example of the tree in the civic space. A foot's connection. I think many of us are aware that to the north, not showing on this diagram, is the future under the railroad with a Foots tunnel. That would be a separate project from the Army Corps related flag, but it's being planned and coordinated around. So ideally, you could go from City Hall under the bridge through our downtown connection center and head south right through here. That would be amazing. A big part of it. Public art. As everyone is probably aware, we have a beautiful new tree grove sculpture in front of phase 1. When originally that tree sculpture was intended to actually be in the civic space at the time, and 3 or 4 years ago, we thought we were going to kind of build this more all at the same time. And as it turned out, we needed to pivot, and we found a great location in phase 1 with the city arts team. And there is a planned relocation of that sculpture in the future. And the BPAC, the Arts and Beautification Group, was very happy to know all those details will be followed, and that we have a plan for it, and it's going to be memorialized kind of in the technical process to relocate that in the future. So we have a great spot. Again, both of those commissions, wanted to, as we go through the next steps with design in the future, they want to obviously see more, get more developed with DPA. So one of the big amenities that's being discussed and was actually supported by the BPAC and the Parks and Rec in terms of the concept of a splash pad. As Amy Hagan has said, there is no, to my knowledge, free access to cooling or water in our community. We have a wonderful facility here, but with a graduated fee structure, but it is a fee structure. This is an open play, an area where anyone walking through can cool their feet, let their child run around, have fun. It would be a great amenity and attraction for people to come downtown, hang out, splash pad, go patronize a local restaurant, that kind of thing. So just as an amenity in downtown. Again, this is, all being thought through. There were definitely questions around how was it going to be maintained, all of those things. Again, Parks and Rec is taking that on as a maintenance, and all of that thoughtful design would go into, sustainability side. It would have to be, work through the design. But what we're seeking really direction in June is, are these concepts viable? Because then we would then take them and actually develop the technical design of these amenities. Another item that the city actually brought forward that along with the splash pad is, with that restroom or restrooms associated with, people wanting to change and that kind of thing. And they did want to identify a restroom. We do have restrooms in the new DCC. They are, I don't know how many feet, but it's a fair bit of a walk from this location over to the new building. And so I think, maybe that distance and a little bit back that would be right there, and people probably wouldn't want to be walking 800 feet over to have to, find a bathroom. That's one of the reasons they wanted to put that in. Plus, the mechanical systems are required with the splash pads, so you really have to be building a little structure out there anyway, and dealing with gray water, storm water, and all of that nature of a splash pad. So that was identified. It is a great location. This picture here, this is another, more of an attraction point. This came out of just a place where people, whether they're visiting or even local, when you're bringing family and having visitors, you want to come down and have that moment of, hey, this is a great view, let's snap a picture. There's some good views that would be developed that you can build up and see, over the railroad, the peaks. And this is just an example. This isn't Flagstaff, but it's kind of an example of what that like. And I mentioned earlier, this naturalized park space in the floodway, it would just be, a space that you could kind of wander down and sit on the grass, that kind of thing. off to the side with a little more of a natural environment as opposed to human being. Another one is food trucks. Community investment has, recognized there's a lot of demand for food trucks in our community. We don't have an organized place in downtown Flagstaff that you can set up your food truck on a regular basis. But currently, my understanding is many of the food trucks just have agreements with local businesses to park in their parking lot, and they're pop-ups, and you follow people on social media. So this would be more of an organized function that, again, the Parks and Rec or community investment kind of manage food truck placement, consistency for vendors through a kind of a permit type system. They envision it. They really do see it as a way to enhance the brick and mortars in the downtown area, because people are, again, walking around searching for food. What are you hungry for? What are, people have different interests depending on their evening, and it gives people options and brings people to the south side to patronize not only a food truck, but other businesses as well. And I think I want to mention one other thing related to the potential construction of this and the timing. I mentioned Parks and Rec would maintain the space. We've done very preliminary budgets for just really this concept, and we're right around current dollars, about 4 million for this. Again, this is very early, rough order of magnitude. Approximately 50% of that, 4 million, about 2 million, is related to the splash pad and the restrooms. I mean, for those direct costs and art. So, we're seeking that partnership with the city also for the upfront capital to actually develop those amenities as part of an overall project. And then depending on, what that would look like, we put that into a future agreement with the city team to identify roles, responsibility, funding for that. And again, the civic space potentially, if the Rio could happen the next 3 years, ideally we're building this in 2028, 2029. But that is, we want to be ready. So this is why we're getting ourselves ready. So with that, I will pause and see some questions. Comments, feedback? Yes.
Have you talked to anybody in the Flagstaff DBA about the food trucks? Because small businesses are hurting so bad down there right now, specifically restaurants. So I could foresee if they saw this pop up that there would be some concern.
Thank you for that. I apologize, I didn't mention that other, we did actually, so the city team as really leading this, stakeholders, Dave McIntyre and Amy Hagan, coordinated with Hunter, the director at DBIA. We did go to attend their board meeting, and they did this presentation to the DBIA. One of the things that Dave, there wasn't, their actual only main concern was, hey, if you're gonna build a restroom, we need to make sure maintenance is identified and there's a commitment on maintenance, because I understand there's challenges on the other restrooms to the north of the track. For whatever those reasons are, but actually that was really their only key thing they mentioned. It wasn't, oh, we were concerned about, this particular business or that business food trucks, but they didn't go into a lot of detail. But yeah, so.
Yes. Can I just clarify, did you meet with the stakeholders or the board?
It was the board.
Okay, so the stakeholder.
Thank you.
The stakeholder meeting is very different. Okay. The actual business owners.
Okay.
So I would be there as, okay. That to me is who we should be doing our due diligence and asking, because it's the businesses that are going to build. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to compliment the city staff. That when we first negotiated this, we normally see this as a lease the DCC, and because it's state property, but because of all this going on, we wanted to, plan it together. Instead of doing that, the city maintained ownership, we entered into an IDA. Gave us the ability to be more dynamic. There was a little bit of outside the box work that we did with the city to allow this. It also took a little bit more to explain it to the feds as to, they're used to seeing leases, but That's actually helped advance the project.
And stuff.
I apologize, I must have got my slides out of order. Just a couple more little components. There is more cool things in the civic space potentially. This idea of a pop-up stage, it's much more of an organic, small venue. Yes, there's trains every 12 minutes or whatever it is, but the idea was kind of a pop open, you know, somebody with guitar, very kind of organic type of musician experience. Different than the Heritage Square where it's, you know, much broader, like bigger venue. So I just wanted to share that and I. Thank you.
Thank you. Now. Back to Jackie. Yeah, bus stop number.
All right, so as Ann just talked about, our largest capital project, the Downtown Convention Center. Phase 1 is very rapidly wrapping up. We are preparing for phase 2, but you know it's quite some time down the road. And we're about to embark on our maintenance, Caspar maintenance facility that we've brought to you a few times to discuss. So really, what the future is for us when it comes to capital are these bus stops. We talked about this. If you've been on the board or the TAC for a while, I believe it was 2 meetings ago, so this meeting 2 years ago. Bus stops was the main purpose of our discussion. We did some group activities prioritizing bus stop improvements. We talked a lot about the ins and outs of bus stops and why we have certain infrastructure in some places and don't have that infrastructure in other places. A lot of times it comes down to things like the right of way, things like a willing landowner to, if there is not right of way. There are things like topography. Flagstaff has some interesting topography, and we have, you know, trying to shoehorn bus stops into places. But we really did, out of that meeting 2 years ago, came up with this prioritized list. So it is time, Prop 488 passed, it is time to start taking off some of those bus stop improvements and making those for our riders out in the community. So just as a quick setting the stage, as a reminder, we do have three basic types of bus stops in our system. Type 1 is the most basic, and that is, you know, do not have room to do anything else. It is a sign. It is a sign on the ground telling you that you are at a bus stop, and that is the only amenity that you are going to have, is knowing that you are at a bus stop. Type 2 is what we call our logo stop. So it has that bench, it has the solar light on the top of it, and on occasion there is a trash can. Correct, Jeremiah? Not with everyone. Trash cans are a beast unto themselves, that, you know, as far as where we can put those. So that is our type 2, so that's the next highest improvement. And obviously a fully improved stop would have the shelter to you know, keep people blocked from the elements. Some of them do have when able to have the trash can and bike racks at those stops as well. Ideally, every bus stop in the system would have a shelter. We don't live in an ideal world, and that is difficult to accomplish. So just looking at some challenging ones, just to get, like, I mean, and I know many of you have seen these examples before, so I won't belabor them too much, but looking at some of the more challenging ones. So the first one is right near the Safeway on Cedar, Route 2. It's one of our most heavily used stops, especially now that we have our partnership with USD. It is the closest downtown bound stop for Coconino High School. So if you're leaving Coconino High School wanting to head towards downtown, you would access this stop. As you can see, there is a retaining wall right there. It makes it really difficult to do much more than put that sign in the ground. And so, you know, that's one that we're love to make improvements and have some challenges. There is an area, if you head a little bit further west, it kind of between some entrances to that Safeway shopping center, there is a grassy area there. You know, so then we would get into needing to negotiate with the business owner about the right of way, because there would not be the city right of way that is allowed to build in that area. And then we also get into, when you relocate a bus stop, it opens up everything with the city processes, with traffic and with pedestrians and things along those lines. And it could trigger something like the need for a pedestrian crossing or something along those lines. Anytime we need to re-permit something, it opens those doors. So we can often expect to have additional costs in addition to just the bus stop. Another great, sorry, not great, another really crappy example is forestry near Walgreens. For those of you like me who take your child to Summit Gymnastics every day, it's the one right in front of Summit Gymnastics. And so as you can see, those are parking spots right behind for that plaza, that shopping plaza, right behind that bus stop. So there is no sidewalk, there are no improvements. Someone gets off at that bus stop, they are, if you are in a mobility device, you are quite challenged because there are no improvements on that part of 4th Street and many other parts of 4th Street. A few more. This one on Route 66 at Arrowhead is a great example of, so this is right in front of Tractor Supply. And when Tractor Supply opened, not many years ago, a few years ago, we asked very nicely for them to give us an easement to place a bus shelter, a bus pad and a shelter in that area. They denied that request, and it is their property, so it was their right to do so. And so we were able to only put a sign in the city right of way where we were able to do that without needing an easement from the property owner. If you've ever driven by this, you will often see people sitting on that curb right there. And I would argue to Tractor Supply that it would be a much more attractive welcome to your business if people were sitting in a bus shelter as opposed to sitting right on your curb. So, sorry, just a little bit about my opinion on and then we could probably show examples on 4th Street all day long. This one is heading southbound on 4th Street. And it's right across from the one that I originally showed by Summit Gymnastics. This one is more over by, there's a church right there. So once again, just this one actually does have some sidewalk, which is a nice thing. But we have there. So this is presented to you and presented information about policy. So it's not right away. But we will always posted and we have some businesses that are very willing to do that. So what I is the community very a little bit there. They won't have projects that go down the road. That's all which is Northwest, whereas Grand West and West Shelter development are not others. Other than paying for this it's that or that you're not capable of access to that. Really all the free cash flows. Did I talk say where right now? Really challenging about that full system sorry for those of you who breaks your heart. So that was problematic. But the system is on side and going to talk about community impression. And that developer has been very interested to have a bus stop in front of Tacos Los Altos. That once again, it's just a sign on the ground, a lot of that curve up by the top. Not a big one. Yeah, it's a highly used stop. It's one of the closest to a shelter. And so it's a highly used stop. And so that business, the developer has been willing to give us an easement. I don't know where they stand in the city process. We've had some challenges. There is a for sale sign up in front of it now, so I'm not sure it's going to go through. But just an example of we really, treat businesses and and we get our comments in early with the city when we go through they're going through the development process. If it is an area where we see that we can make an improvement, and through the development process, we certainly try our hardest to do that. And that's really where we have stopped at this point. We have not gone to any of these others, and please know that number 4 is we put it on here as a legal option, but we cannot pursuing it at any point. But really what we would like to go through is number 2, that voluntary sale. So for instance, that one I gave you at the Cedar Safeway, working with that property owner to say, hey, we would love to get a better amenity out here, make it a better welcome to your business. Would you be willing to entertain, we would ask for donation first, presuming that they would probably not be amenable to that. What could we do then on a voluntary sale for an easement with that? So, what comes with those, there's of course some challenges. We, working with those landowners, they have to be a willing participant. There's environmental work that has to be done. If you're expending any federal dollars, there's significant environmental work. It does open us up to all of the city processes as opposed to having to go through permitting. So, and
Do we need that a crosswalk? Do we need, things along those lines? And then obviously, staff workload as well, and Heather and our transport group talked about that earlier, staffing up for some of these things. And this is certainly one of them, this moving forward with some of this capital. This next slide is gonna be one where if you don't have it in front of you, I'm very sorry. It's not big, so I apologize. So we actually just submitted a congressionally directed spending request to Senators Kelly and Gallego through their process for our bus stop infrastructure. So we were actually awarded a fiscal year 2025 earmark for electric bus charging infrastructure. Through the continuing resolution, no earmarks were funded. So although we were awarded, it was never funded. We had the opportunity to resubmit that earmark and it would have priority in their new process. We opted not to resubmit that. I'm giving the current status, the current everything we've already discussed. I won't belabor with electric charging. So we opted to resubmit one that we had submitted last year that was not funded for bus stop infrastructure. We changed up a lot of our language in it and made it far more appealing to the current administration, talking about how having improved infrastructure, bus stop infrastructure gives better access for families and for everyone and students to access schools, to access medical care, all of those things. So it really made it more about economic development and access. So a few of the things that we're looking at doing as part of one of the bigger parts of that budget ask, it was about a $3 million ask, which is about the threshold for an earmark ask. One of the biggest ones is a crosswalk at Huntington and Grant. So I'm actually going to go to the next one. So a couple of years ago, we added some bus stops. We had a huge gap in Route 7 on Huntington between bus stops. There was a pretty significant gap. Flagstaff Shelter Services recently, in the last couple of years, purchased a motel in this area to convert to shelter living. But this was also identified as a huge gap. There are several other hotels in this area as well. So we did 2 signs in the ground, type 1. Here and here. We did not require an easement for either of those. They're in the right of way. The ridership on those bus stops has been phenomenal. And if you've ever driven by this Holiday Inn Express, they have a sign out in front of it that warms my heart. It's a now hiring sign, and they talk about giving a free mountain line bus pass. Our bus stop is literally right in front of them. As one of their hiring bonuses is that you get a free mountain line pass, which I love that so much. So we would like to create some more permanent infrastructure in this area, and we know the city, through going through this process many years ago, that they will require a pedestrian crossing. The site, the speed on this road plus the sight line with that turn in the road, there is no way that they would permit the stop, nor should they permit the stops on either side without staying there. So that was a significant portion of our ask was related to the infrastructure and the crossings there. And then this is basically just going down your list, the list that you gave us when you did, those of you who were in the room, and I know many of you were, 2 years ago when we did that bus stop prioritization exercise. This was what we came up with. So this is what was submitted as part of that earmark request. So let's see, just to make sure everything. So we will likely hear about that in the coming months. Obviously, there are many hurdles to go through. We know that we put ourselves in a little bit of a disadvantage by not resubmitting an already approved project because those are probably going to take priority. But we believe that we made a good case. We made a good economic development case. We made a good infrastructure case for those. Now, if we are not successful in that earmark request, we know these things still need to be done. So we will start working on developing those in our capital plan every year and chipping away at them as time goes on, so that we can start to see some of those improvements for our riders.
Questions for Jackie? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
As part of project and maintenance options. Carolina.
Well, I'm gonna try to go into the middle of the room, change it up a little bit. So everyone's standing at the front. So I'm here to talk about the maintenance facility and some options that Mountain Line is working on. So some background with the project. We have a phased approach with this. We have phase one, which is what we're working on, which is the maintenance facility. And part of that is we're trying to make 6 work bays for our mechanics and also build it to support 488, actually house our maintenance inside. Because right now we have a facility that we outgrew fairly quickly after building it because of the architects. Right now, half a bus sticks out of our current maintenance facility every time they work on it, rain, shine, snow, cold, hot. This gives them the opportunity to be inside. That also makes it a lot safer for us, especially with the EV aspects. So we're also going to do, we have part of this project is phase 2, which is going to be a bus storage. And that bus storage is not yet funded. We're not going forward, but we did build this plan so the buildings can attach and be one. So part of this project we've been working on, and we've been working with in construction. We learned that due to the amount of stuff going underground, it's going to make us hard for us to maintain service for the fleet side, maintaining the buses. And so we worked with Kenny Construction and along with ourselves, and we decided a phased approach, trying to make it so we can, if we step out of the way for a very small amount of time, we can go back to normal operations while they finish the whole project. So right here, because it's very hard to see, I'll try to describe it a little better. Tiny. This is the phased approach we started. So the red phase, the major construction you see there, is going to be underground utilities, stormwater management, and unfortunately, the little building that's labeled shop 3 with a little dot on it, or shop 1, sorry, is where we conduct our maintenance. So in this time, they have to completely rip out majority of that red area, work underground, which means we will not have access. Then we're going to phase 1B, which we actually pushed off to go into the second phase of the project just recently. And then phase 2 is actually going to be demoing of our old facility and starting construction of that 6 bays. So once we get done with the red, then our team can get back in there and work around and partner with KCS to make sure we stay operational. So during that 3 months, that red phase, we have to find a solution, which we've been delicately working with our partners, NAU and FUSD, to give us a place to work on our buses. So, and when we say a place to work on our buses, we're not moving our whole maintenance team over there because we still have enough room at our property to maintain our buses, the on-site maintenance, the preventive maintenance, fluids, the stuff we don't have to get the buses off the ground. So a lot of the services, we can put them on low jacks, get under there, work with creepers, maintain our buses on site. The off-site repairs where we're working with NAU and FUSD. And that's going to be for those major repairs where we have to get the bus up in the air. And so through the partnership we're working with, we have 2 sites that we are going to be utilizing on an as-needed basis. And hopefully we don't have to use it, but it is built in just in case. Anybody have any questions?
Questions for Jeremiah?
What was the consideration for space? I mean, as far as, you know, you got your EVs, we're always talking about the safety aspect of it. Is there a limited space? Is there a space that is mandated by the feds? I mean, I don't.
Do you mean when you're de-energizing?
Yeah.
So there is not, there's like a 6-foot space that you can minimally cordon off. So depending on what you're doing, where you're working, you can actually limit it with cones and caution tape or fences. But this big aspect was, you know, in the
maintenance facility, we have more stuff so we can remove the heavy batteries off the roof because they're really heavy. We can't do that currently. We have to pay a contractor to come up if we remove our hybrid buses batteries, which are not as heavy. But now we can do that on site and we can also do it safely. So that was the big push.
Questions. This is actually for Heather. I just want to make sure I understand, after each presentation, it says board may provide direction, but there's no recommendation from staff at this time. I'm assuming that means that in a future meeting, when we are discussing this, you are going to seek board actual approval on all these items.
There are several of these items that will have board action. There are several of them that won't have board action. Today, we are not seeking any action, but we are trying to take your feedback so that as we bring future updates, whether they have action associated with them or not, we're accommodating those questions and ensuring we're
So like the
responding to your concerns.
increase in salaries and stuff that actually have a dollar associated with it, we'll have those discussions later.
Yes. Yes, the increase in salaries, the compensation study is incorporated into the budget that you will be asked to adopt. It's not anticipated to come back to you as a separate item.
Okay.
But yes, if there is something specifically you want us to bring back as an item, I'd be happy to go over what would be the things that we see as separate action items coming back to the board. But not everything that you see here will result in action item coming back to the board. Some of these are trying to provide information to you so that you understand how we're approaching things and what we're going through. Some of them have impact, so there might be a separate but related item that comes back for action.
Like the organizational chart and then the increase in salaries, which will be in our budget, but detail of that would be so that we are understanding how it's related. Like our budget, I can't remember last year if we saw comparison from prior year to this year.
We did February, we brought the workforce budget to the board and detailed that out with the board and the TAC. And at that time, I think we discussed the capacity that we built for changes in org structure and change in compensation plan. And so the goal would be then in June to seek adoption of the budget that included both of those items as covered in February.
Okay. All right.
The only thing I'd add about the buses and the NAU partnership, just because nothing's easy. We are trying to review IDAs to make sure we can be back on. You know, I don't see that being a roadblock.
I don't think there's a current IGA that has this type of thing in there, so I've already gotten the details of Randy, and I'll work with Emily to kind of figure it out. Yeah, we'll get it happen. We got time. September, we're good.
Bryson will be here.
No.
If I can mention, as the person who sort of reviews the IGAs, earlier is better.
No, trust me, and we're also, I know our contracts office.
I usually get, it's not doing tomorrow. So.
No. To be very clear, I'm a very timely person. It'll be submitted by next week so that we can review it and have it signed before, I'd say before the end of June.
Yeah, the earlier we can get it to review, because we also really do try to. This is very helpful when we work on IGAs. We also try to see if there's a way to improve the process. Yeah, from our standpoint, the IGA is more than just a contractual agreement. It really is trying to implement a process or goal. And the more we have that and try to reflect in the IGA, I want to make sure it doesn't interfere with that. It's the best approach. Sorry, I didn't mean it.
You're totally fine. Totally fine.
I found that particularly negotiating IGAs and then drafting the IGAs, it's a very good way to bring two government entities that are working together to sort of common ground and understand what's really going to happen out of it. So to me, it's more than a contract document. It's my baby.
All right. And Jeremiah?
You presented no study for that, actually. Okay.
Let's recognize that we are down to 29 minutes.
Summit School is over here somewhere.
Remaining items on the agenda. So, we are happy to prioritize any of the remaining 4 items or take them until time runs out. If there's a specific item that you would like us to cover today, we'd like to skip to that and prioritize it. So we had an update on the first mile, last mile project. We have a review of KPI goal setting. We have Prop 488 and where we're at with service implementation. And we have a generic update on the work plan update. So that's just showing where we're at on the work plan items. So if any of those are of keen interest, we can jump right to it. Otherwise, we can just continue until we run out of time. Anything not covered today will then be put on the June agenda items for updates and discussion.
I would like to hear the Prop 48.
Okay.
So
Okay, we will jump right to that. And if somebody else wants to say there's something else they want to hear next, we can jump to that as well. I love it. We want to use your time right with what we have left this afternoon.
Everybody close your eyes.
Yeah.
Proposition 48 passed in November. It actually does not go into effect from a tax collection standpoint until July 1st. Sorry, I have a mint in my mouth. Trying to get rid of it. So as a reminder, these are the things that were provided in Proposition 488. So we called it more convenience, but it's really about more frequent bus service, more hours of service, so a longer span of service. That could also include later night service as well. Service to new areas, and then the continued electrification of the plant. I know that we were successful in November, so this is what we've come up with as kind of our, as the city has things when, this road brought to you by Proposition, whatever, 419. So this is our version of that to remind people the specific projects that are going to be tied to Proposition 488. So as we've already discussed, we're delivering on a couple of those promises with new service on July 27th of this year. These were more low-hanging fruit things that we are able to do knowing the tax collection that's going to be coming in starting on July 1st. So the first one really checks that more future routes, service to new areas box for us. So this is the extension of Route 8. You all have seen this. It right now ends here and just does this loop. We'll continue out West Route 66 and then serve go out to the Woody Mountain roundabout. As a quick side note, we are still waiting, we are still waiting, right? Nothing happened while I was in DC. On final approval from ADOT for the stops that we have proposed along West Route 66, that is all in their jurisdiction. So just wanted to make sure that was clear that we are still waiting that minor element. And then also in 2025, checking that more frequent bus service box. We will be implementing a 30-minute weekday service on Route 5. Route 5 is the one that goes out to Cheshire. It's currently 60-minute service. It was an outlier in our system. It was the only route that had weekday peak 60-minute service, and it was very very inconvenient and very difficult to time transfers between routes with that. So this will bring it on par with the next kind of, the highest frequency or lowest frequency route in our system. But we won't have this outlier anymore when we implement that. So then what comes next? So we have working internally to develop a plan, as Heather mentioned, or Heather and our consultants mentioned in the organizational structure conversation. Beefing up the planning team is definitely one of the parts of this, as well as everything that we talk about here is also operators. I mean, we're going to do all of those things I list under more frequent bus service. More operators. It's physically impossible. So all of that staffing has also been taken into consideration. So in 2026, what we're looking to implement is 20-minute peak frequency on routes 3 and 66. So Route 66 does exactly what you think it would do. It goes up and down Route 60, back and forth on Route 66. It's one of our more well-used routes, and you can often see some crush loads on that. And the difference, although it's 30-minute service right now, the difference between 30-minute and 20-minute service is astronomical. I realize it's 10 minutes, and that sounds like it's such a well, that's not a big deal. 20 minutes allows you to not know the schedule. 20, you know, you like to know it because, but if you miss a bus, you know that a bus, the next one is no more than 19 minutes away. 30 minutes is that there just seems to be a brain break there for a lot of people. So when we implemented 20-minute service on Route 2 over the ensuing years, the ridership followed suit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question. So do we have to add a bus to that? How do we get that 20-minute?
Yes, we add a bus to that route. Okay. Yep, to both of those routes. And when we say peak frequency, just so everyone understands, on weekdays, currently on Monday through Friday, we have what we call peak. It's when the bus comes the most often, and it's typically, so like usually for the first couple rounds in the morning, the bus is an off-peak frequency, which is usually an hour service for those routes, and then quickly goes into, we add another bus in and goes to, you know, right now both of these routes run 30-minute peak frequency until about 6 p.m. Depends on the route, but it's until about 6 p.m. and then it goes back to that hour or the less frequent service depending on what that route schedule is. So that's what peak is that kind of bulk of the weekday is peak. And so then looking at Route 66, which I mentioned before is one of our higher ridership routes, you often see really full buses. We are looking at doing 30-minute off-peak weekday frequency on Route 66. So Monday through Friday, bad way to put it, the worst service you would have on Route 66 is 30 minutes. So we would never, Monday through Friday, be operating 60-minute service on Route 66. It would always be either 30 or, which would be a huge improvement on that route. And then the other really significant thing that we would do in 2026 would be to increase Saturday service to match weekday frequency. So whatever Monday through Friday looks like for all of these routes, it would look like that on Saturday in the span of service. So right now, Monday through Friday service goes from roughly 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's rough. And then Saturday and Sunday service goes roughly 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So Sunday would stay the same. We wouldn't touch anything on Sundays. Saturday would match Monday through Friday. That's a huge request that we get from the public is, I mean, overall more frequent weekend service, but with Saturday being that priority. So that's what we're looking at in 2026. Then moving on to 2027. So just another kind of tweak with making that off-peak frequency on Route 3. So basically meaning that the worst service you would have on Route 3 would Monday through Saturday, because now we've added Saturdays in there, would be 30 minutes. And then this is one of the big promises we made was about more hours of service. So we don't know what this looks like yet. The industry is, you know, obviously it's rapidly evolving. We don't know if this looks like putting a bus out on every route until midnight. That might not be the most efficient way to serve people who need this later night service. Maybe it's a partnership with a Lyft and Uber or taxi type of thing, where if you rode the bus earlier in the day, you could get a subsidized ride home on one of those services, which would be less expensive than us putting all of our buses out on the road until midnight. So continued work will be done to refine that one and see what that will look like in the future. And then ongoing, so the work won't be done in 2027. There's some things we'll be doing along the way, and then some things that we'll need more information to do. I already talked about the bus stop amenity upgrades, that operational assessment that I spoke about earlier, doing that to see, 4th Street's a great example. Right now, we serve 4th Street and, we serve the southern part of it a couple times a day for NPA, to service NPA. North of 66, we serve it only going in one direction. And so we know, and there's so much development happening all along the 4th Street corridor. So we know that we have a huge opportunity to better serve that corridor, and that operational assessment will look at that. Pardon me, the zero bus emission transition that Busy already spoke about, maintenance facility construction that Jeremiah spoke about, the ongoing staffing needs that we talked about earlier, and then that nebulous service to new areas, which once again, that operational assessment, and then our new 5-year, as we get into our 5-year planning process, will also show where transit service is most needed as development patterns change in our community. We will also be updating our website to have all of this clearly outlined to the public about what they can expect from us and when they can expect it when it comes to Proposition 488 delivery. And then
Obviously, some things, depending on federal funding, timelines may shift, things may shift, but our intention is to deliver on everything that we promised in that ballot initiative. We have a tremendous track record with that and don't have any intention of changing that. That's what I have for Proposition 488. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Jackie?
What's next? You guys have 3 choices.
We do KPI discussion. Only if we get that in 17 minutes.
I can handle that. Yes. I presented on strategic plan goals and also the financial service performance benchmarks before. It occurred to us that we don't ask the board to set our goals. We identify goals internally, we report on them, but we never actually asked for adoption, so that's what I'm doing today. So I'm seeking adoption or approval by the board in June, same situation in the ZEP plan. So anything I could do today, I'll incorporate, bring that back in June, seeking consent on the consent vote. Okay, financial service performance benchmarks. This is based on, so what I'm going to talk about for each of these slides is how we identify these goals, what goes into it, and why we think that this goal makes sense for this year. And so I'm identifying FY26 proposed goals. So we start with financial data from the annual adopted budget. Josh and I get together and we fill out financial data, and then I identify trip data based on the service that we're anticipating to provide in the next fiscal year. So that means, how many buses are we doing on Route 10? Is it 5? Is it 4? We're up to 5 full service. How many buses are we putting on Mountain Express? It was 3 last year, is it 4 this year? The various service changes that Jackie just talked about. That goes into all just building out how many service hours, how many service miles we're going to put on. Over the year, I incorporate all school schedules, FUSD, NAU, and those, when they start, when they stop. So all of that goes into how much service we are going to put out on the street. And then based on the service, I project ridership. So my data is the trip data or ridership data, and then I get combined with Josh's financial data. And that's how we come up with all of the information you see here. I incorporate previous 12 months of ridership, year-over-year trends. Yeah, a lot of things. It is a guess, like in FY25, I was hopeful. I thought we were going to get to 20% ridership increase over FY23. We were more like 12%. But that was also half under service, less service, not our full reduced service. That's what I'm trying to do, instead of our full service. So different aspects come into that. So my FY26 trip goal just for fixed route is 13% increase over FY25. So again, thinking into what did I see this last year? We're gonna have service increases. How much ridership do I think I'm gonna see on Route 8? Which has, I hope, a lot of ridership. But yeah, trying to be realistic, but also aspirational. So that's how we get to the FY26 goals. So again, everything on the right side, I will be asking for board approval in June. And I can go back to any of these slides, interrupt me with questions that you may have. So this is our financial performance benchmarks. Now we're going to go into our strategic plan scorecard. So again, everything on the right column are the metrics that I'm asking board to approve in June. So I'm going to go through each of these items. On-time performance. So I worked with Brady on this item. So on top of the what we're currently doing, and it doesn't change. So our on-time performance, we define our bus on-time performance as only departures from time points. It's not every bus stop. It's the ones that we advertise in our ride guide. And it's only departures because our bus cannot leave the bus stop early. That will count as a late or against their on-time performance.
So so me riding the bus, I'm gonna look at the ride guide and say, 8 AM is when my bus is going to depart from the stop. So having a bus depart early is very detrimental. People are expecting it, so we can't get there. So it's very important that it's just departures and from time points. 0 minutes early is on time and 0 to 5 minutes late is also on time. Then paratransit and microtransit, the next 2 items down. We use the arrival time when that passenger requests it. And then there's a 30-minute window, so 0 minutes early, it's on time, and then 0 to 30 minutes after the pickup, negotiated pickup is on time. So a little different, the different definitions there. So our current goal, we talked last month that 95%, is that realistic? We're not achieving that, every time I present it to you, we need to adjust that. Randy and I came together, we looked at a few other peer transit agencies. We looked internally, we looked at various components of the on-time. So the early on-time performance, the late on-time performance alone, instead of combining them. And what Randy and I really came out with is that on-time performance is challenging. We can't control everything. We can't control construction out there. We're definitely at the mercy of a lot of things with on-time performance. It's not something that demonstrates, I think, our success. It is very important to the public that we are reliable. But as Jackie said, once frequency starts to increase, you're on like the actual on-time performance, another bus is coming. Like this is still very important, but just like there is another bus right behind. So there's a lot of aspects to on-time performance. So what Brady and I are proposing for this 26 is keeping the same 95% on-time performance goal for all 3 of our modes, bus, paratransit, microtransit. But adjusting the data that goes into it to just include early departures from our bus stops. And that is only bus, so we're not changing anything but the data in paratransit and go. Those will continue to be defined as they are today. But the bus will only include early. And so as you can see, just in the first half of this fiscal year, FY25, 90%, we're still not reaching that 95%, but we did last year. So it is attainable, and something we're still working towards, something Sam and the trainers are all trying to refine our on-time performance here. So really impacting what we can, the early departures. The next scorecard goal is optimize emissions. Jeremiah and I worked together on this. So where the top again is what we're currently using and the bottom is what we're recommending. So what we're currently using is total emissions that we're putting out there. And it makes me have to do math every time. Well, how much emissions are we actually reducing? Because that's the point of this goal is we're trying to reduce our emissions. And so we recommend changing to show the reduction year to year. And so our proposed goal is 77 tons of greenhouse gases. So this comes from, so we use our electric buses actual miles. We multiply by the industry standard miles per gallon of a diesel bus to determine the number of diesel gallons avoided. And then we use the EPA calendar to get tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's definitely a bit of a process. Something internally we're working on is our veracity of the data that we get from our buses right now, trying to have them identify emissions for us. So again, I have this complicated calculation, but we definitely feel very comfortable with the numbers that we're putting out there for this. The FY26 goal is the average emissions from the previous 12 months, so February 2024 to January 2025, when I wrote this. Staff recommend the change to the actual reduction. Item employee engagement score. So our FY26 goal that we're proposing is 7%. The employee engagement score is actually an average of the 6 survey questions. Survey questions identified here, and then it is broken out, and I do not average averages. I am taking the actual total number, so any data version out there, I'm not skewing the data. So kind of interesting to see where our weaknesses among these items and really working on that. And the HR team is really working on where we had weaknesses here. And so we do feel confident about reaching that 77% goal in FY26.
Busy.
Yes, please.
So Going back to my high school days, that's like a C plus, right? It's not that impressive. So what is the reasoning behind at least going up to 80 to be a B? The C is just passing.
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. I think part of our goal setting is that it's attainable. We would absolutely, we'd love to see 100%, you know. We want our employees to be engaged on all of these items, but what is actually achievable? So in future years, you know, once we reach that 77 again, we'd absolutely love to continue increasing that figure. We just want to make sure that we can succeed with our goal identified.
And if I may, when we presented the survey results, a couple months ago, there is a reason that 77 is considered a really good goal. When you look at it as an A, B, C, D, F, that's not exactly how it translates here. And I'm sorry, I don't remember it. So I'd like to follow up with you. Because when you say it that way, I agree with you. Well, we should at least be a B, right? I mean, I'm an A+ girl. It should be an A+. But there was a reason that the 77 is really actually a very good goal. And I know when we did our survey results, that 76%, I think was 14 or 15% higher than the national average among
I'm just
transit.
gonna ask you if there's an industry standard.
I'll dig that out and make sure we share that in our June presentation to respond to that question. And then if you think that we still should change it to 80, we have time to do that.
You do surveys every sometime every year.
I believe about the same time. Yes, Cody's saying yes. It feels the same time as an employee doing this survey. And just to that point, I did get with HR about industry standard because I had the same question. Is there an industry standard out there? So we did find Gallup 2024 identified that average employee engagement among US organizations is 31%.
Wow.
So yeah, 77 is actually looking really good compared to that, but I appreciate your point.
Busy, if I can jump in, yeah, I did some research on that too, and it's actually between 30 and 60 is the average in the transit industry. So 70, anything above 70 or anything above 60 is considered a really good score.
Good enough.
Yeah, I would love to see that source.
Okay, I'll send it to you. I got it.
Vehicle accidents that were preventable, our FY 26 goal is 40%. So I have a graph here. We did reach 40% in FY 21, so we have total accidents in orange on top. So in FY 24, it was 72 total accidents. Again, accident is anything that touches we define accident when a vehicle makes contact with anything. Most are very minor items, running over a cone or a mirror cap. So this is not buses being demolished all over the roads. So 72, that's a lot of minor things, okay? Don't mean to make anybody very concerned here. The percentage of preventable accidents reflects our strong safety culture and emphasis on proactively managing risk. Staff chose the 40% because it's achievable. Again, we got it in FY 21. It's a demonstration of our training and safety recognition programs. The CDL course enables us to do more recurring training without having to book a public place like the Coconino lot. So we do anticipate seeing that percentage go down to 40% from our current 51%. And preventable accidents will almost always be done by new drivers, 1 to 2 years. The more that we can retain our drivers, we do also hope that we would see this goal met. So it's very linked with operator tenureship with us. And so we see a lot of contributing factors. Yes, thank you.
Suzie, do you also take into the calculation the number of vehicles or hours on the road? Because obviously if you have more vehicles or more hours, that's going to increase the likelihood that there's potentially more accidents. So is that part of the calculation?
It's not. We
Yeah.
do show the accidents per hour, accidents per mile in our overall strategic performance KPIs. It's just not the scorecard.
Because it may be that the difference between 2020 and 2024 is, I mean, 2020, you're talking about COVID. So we have way less vehicles on the road. So I don't know that it's an apples to apples is a fair comparison. I think we might be just saying, it's just something to think of. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but.
Thank you. No, that's a really good point. And talking with Sam about this item, I wish I would have put more pre-COVID data. Because Sam actually said we were better pre-COVID, and maybe that's from training, maybe it's from higher retention of operators. You know, there's probably a lot of
Accidents per miles might get to it because more, yeah.
So on that, I think that the statistic is a little skewed, right? Because if you're looking at a percentage, if you have higher accidents, right, which is something you don't, but so many of them were preventable, then your percentage changes, right? So maybe the number should just be either, to Aaron's point, accidents per mile, or overall number of accidents. Period. I don't know.
If I may, so the scorecard was developed as an attachment to the strategic plan, and we are going to be updating our strategic plan as it expires in 2025 at the October joint meeting. So I think it's an opportunity for us to do exactly what we're doing here. Let's refine some of these. So I would really appreciate if we could not change them right now. But yes, the feedback is great, and let's incorporate that into that discussion in October, where we're really updating the scorecard.
I think I have 2 minutes, so I'm gonna rush through. Thank you for your questions. This is very great. I have 2 more items. So community value of mountain light services. It was 93.1%. We do anticipate conducting, so this comes from our Never Rider survey. The direct question, it is a valuable service for our community. I agree, I disagree, I have no opinion. The last time we provided this, so we do this every couple of years, FY15, FY19, and now we're planning to do it FY26. So we still find this applicable. We've achieved this goal before, 93.1, so we do think it makes sense for FY26. And then last item is non-federal dollars spent on operations. So local dollars include transit sales tax, fares, including Eco Pass, NAU contributions in lieu of student fare, and any other fees for service such as Mountain Express, County Fare. So everything else is federal dollars outside of those items. The total service costs are based on the approved budget. And then, just like Josh said, we fund everything with the federal dollars first, because that's about 30%, a third of it. And then we fill in with those other funding amounts, the fares, and then backfill with the transit sales tax last. So making sure that our resiliency is high with our non-federal dollars spent on operations, it's really important. And our goal, 67% has been reached. And that's based on our budget again. So with any of that, I'd be happy to answer.
And please, if you have suggestions on how we change these up, we want those. I don't want to cut anybody off today. I think it's going to be really important when we go into the strategic and talk about how does the scorecard reflect the strategic plan going forward. And we'll have a couple of years of these data points now to talk about how they do or don't make sense. And I can just say thank you all so much for your time and your input. If you have follow-up questions from today, please let us know. We want June to be effective, but we'll put everything we didn't get to on June.
Which is back in June 18th for the board. With that.
And please note, the June 18th meeting is in the new building. Please come to our new building. Sorry, we open June 9th.
Meeting is very much.